medicine here in Oklahoma?
Yes.
Can you give the judge some idea of where you practice and in what field?
After I finished fellowship in 1980, I began practicing endocrinology on the Integris Baptist campus. It was just Baptist then, and I've been there ever since. That's 39 years.
How much longer do you plan to go?
Till I get tired of it.
Thank you. Hopefully that will not occur today. We'll try to get you on and off and out of here. We've been here a while, and I think everybody's ready to move on for a weekend. Doctor, can you explain to Judge Bachman what the practice of endocrinology entails?
Endocrinology deals with all of the glands that secrete hormones into the body internally, and with errors of metabolism, like, say, problems with calcium or sodium or any kind of metabolic problem like that. And there's a million ways it can go wrong.
Can you give us some idea of the kind of patient you would see on a daily basis?
Whether it be patients with pituitary or thyroid problems or adrenal problems or diabetes.
And doctor, as part of your profession, have you served on the Oklahoma Drug Utilization Review Board for a period of time?
Yes, I've been on the board since 2006 and been chairman since 2007.
The court has heard some, they run up here and give me notes sometimes because I forget things. I apologize if I have to circle back. They want to know, I want you to explain what toxicology and pharmacology is. I should have had you do that, and I apologize.
Pharmacology is the study of the actions and fate of medications in the body. Toxicology is the same study, but of toxins in the body. So if you're talking about strychnine, that's toxicology, and if you're talking about penicillin, that's pharmacology. But it should not be confused with pharmacy. It has nothing to do with pharmacy. Pharmacy is the storage and distribution and dispensing of medications. Pharmacology is understanding and teaching how they work.
Thank you, doctor. I take it you've devoted a good deal of time to your work on the Drug Utilization Review Board?
Yes.
How did you end up serving on the Drug Utilization Review Board?
Well, Dr. Whitsitt was chairman of the board for many years, and he's a clinical pharmacologist.
Tom Whitsitt?
Yeah. And when he decided to step down, he recommended to the State Medical Association that they nominate me, and they did.
And you've been there ever since?
Haven't missed a meeting.
Really? Haven't missed a meeting?
Not one.
Well, can you explain briefly to the court what the Drug Utilization Review Board does?
Well, our mission as we see it is to make sure that the patients on Medicaid in Oklahoma get the medications they need when they need it and given appropriately, and they don't get medications they don't need or that are ill-advised. That's the way the board sees it. Our job is to review medications. By law, any FDA-approved medication has to be considered by Medicaid, but we can make rules on what circumstances and what diseases these drugs are appropriate for and in what amounts and given by whom. So we have that discretion. So say a drug is approved by the Food and Drug Administration, and there are other choices besides the one in consideration that are considerably less expensive and equally effective, then we may make rules that under which circumstances you might get the more expensive one, and on which circumstances you might get the less expensive one.
Now, as I understand it, Doctor, the Drug Utilization Review Board makes recommendations which are then adopted by the healthcare authority. Is that correct?
That is correct. We don't have the authority to set the rules, but we advise.
So in your tenure on the board, has the Oklahoma Healthcare Authority accepted the recommendations of the Drug Utilization Review Board?
They have. I vaguely recall one circumstance where, for budgetary reasons, they delayed our recommendation, but they accepted it.
So the board recommends, and then the Healthcare Authority decides when to implement that recommendation.
Yeah, the impression I get is they know that we look into these in great depth and discuss them, the literature and the facts that are known about a drug, and make our decision with a great deal of thought, and they accept that.
And doctor, do you agree that the decisions of the Drug Utilization Review Board is adopted by the Oklahoma Healthcare Authority can affect prescribing patterns for Medicaid patients?
Well, yes. There are some more expensive drugs that they have to prove that they have a reason to prescribe that drug. They have to submit evidence that's reviewed. And so that's going to affect prescribing habits. You're going to have to jump through hoops to get this particular medicine you'd like to give, and if you can show the right reasons, then you get it.
And the court has already heard testimony, doctor, about various tiers of medication within the Medicaid system, about quantity limits and about prior authorizations. And are those the kinds of things that impact utilization for Medicaid patients?
Yeah, we recommend quantity limits, prior authorizations, steps taken in prior authorizations in order to make a drug available. There's no drug that's not available. You just have to have the right reasons.
Thank you, doctor. Do you hold a DEA license to prescribe Class 2 medications?
I do.
And we're talking about opioids among that class?
Yes.
I take it you have an OBN license that allows you to do the same in Oklahoma.
That's correct.
In your medical practice, do you treat patients with diagnosis of chronic or acute pain and use opioids for that?
Yes, I do.
Have you prescribed both long and short-acting opioids in your practice?
Yes.
And do you believe that both short-acting and long-acting opioids contain the potential for abuse, misuse, diversion, and addiction?
They certainly do.
How long have you known that, doctor?
Since I became a fellow in pharmacology in 1967.
And has anything changed since 1967 to convince you those things I just said are not true?
No, human nature and human problems and cravings and addictions were the same in 67 that they are now.
Doctor, is among the fellows with whom you practice at Integris, is that common knowledge that opioids contain the risk of abuse, misuse, addiction, and diversion?
They certainly do.
Now, you prescribe them anyway to given patients?
Have I what?
You have prescribed them, even knowing that, to a certain set of patients?
Yes.
Can you explain to the court why you would make that decision?
I think one of our duties is to relieve pain in a responsible manner.
And doctor, that is true even though of all the recent publicity about this case or opioids in general?
That hasn't changed a thing.
On occasion, as member of the Drug Review Board, Drug Utilization Review Board, or in your private practice, have you come into contact with representatives of pharmaceutical companies?
They attend every meeting.
And I want to talk to you a little bit about that. Before I want to ask you if you've ever been encouraged to prescribe opioids which you thought were not appropriate for a given patient by any representative of Janssen or Johnson & Johnson.
No, but not by them or any other representative.
Have you ever been forced by a hospital to prescribe opioids you considered to be inappropriate for a patient?
No.
You are aware that these medications come with FDA-approved labels that indicate what the medicine is for and these various risks and hazards associated with it.
I'm very aware of that.
Do you believe, doctor, that those patients to whom you prescribe opioids would suffer if you were unable to do so?
Yeah, they would have an extreme diminution of their quality of life.
In this case, doctor, the state has maintained that Oklahoma physicians are unaware of the risks and benefits of opioid medications. Do you agree based on your training and experience?
I think
Objection
that,
for the record, that's absolutely false. We have not maintained that.
I think they've maintained it repeatedly, Judge.
Most certainly have not. He knows what our position is about opioids. I don't have a problem with him asking hypothetical, like doctor, if the state said this, what's your opinion? But we have not maintained what it said. That's not true.
I overrule the objection.
Thank you. Doctor, you may answer.
you'll have to ask the question again.
Well, I wish I could ask it as well as I asked
lost
it the
it.
first time. Draw that objection again. Doctor, in this case, the state has maintained that Oklahoma physicians are unaware of the risks and benefits of opioid medications. Do you agree?
I think that's utter nonsense. I think every physician is aware.
Doctor, in this case, the state maintains that its licensed doctors need to be re-educated as to the risks and benefits of opioid medication. Do you need to be re-educated?
No.
Do you believe those people with whom you work need to be re-educated?
Only to the extent of recently they've said, be very careful of the quantities you prescribe, because Uncle Joe could be dipping into the stash. But other than that, in terms of knowledge of the pharmacology, ill effects, good effects, dangers, the physicians all know that.
And you're referring to the recent enactments of quantity limits by the Oklahoma Healthcare Authority in 2014 and by the legislature thereafter?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the education, is be careful how many you prescribe. And I think that wasn't always followed very carefully in the past.
In your experience, doctor, as chairman of the Drug Utilization Review Board, representatives of the pharmaceutical industry sit on that board, or a representative?
There is one representative from some pharmaceutical industry on the board, yes.
Has that representative ever encouraged you to give, or the board to prescribe more opiates?
No.
Has that representative ever given false or misleading information to the board based on your experience and practice?
No.
Has any representative of Janssen tried to influence a decision by the Drug Utilization Review Board as to the prescription of Class II opioid medications?
I don't know if it was Janssen representative or who, but what they try to convince us is that their very expensive formulations are worth the cost. If you are going to prescribe opiates to treat pain, they would very much like you to prescribe their expensive version. And that's all, not to give it to anybody that doesn't need it, but if you're going to give it, please use our high-cost drug.
Has anybody with the Janssen or Johnson & Johnson ever gotten in your ear? There's been testimony in this case that the board, the DERB board, has been pushed and marketed and misled about opioids. Has any representative of Janssen ever done that to you?
No, they haven't. That's utter nonsense.
In your practice, doctor, has any person associated with Johnson or Janssen & Janssen ever attempted to convince you that opioids are more beneficial or less dangerous than your education, training, and experience has indicated?
No.
Has anyone with Johnson & Janssen encouraged you to prescribe more opioids than you thought appropriate?
Never.
Now, as I understand it, doctor, we have the PDMP, which the court's heard testimony about, and I don't want to get into it a great deal with you, became mandatory in Oklahoma in 2015.
Yes.
Does the pharmacy, the Board of Pharmacy or the pharmacy school, I can't remember which one, actually sets the agenda for your Drug Utilization Review Board meetings?
It's College of Pharmacy,
College
yes.
of Pharmacy, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I got that down. And do they provide you with regular reports concerning the PDMP as it relates to opioids?
Well, that may have changed recently, but until recently, they weren't allowed to use the PMP. They weren't allowed access to it for reasons that escape me.
In fact, I think you have indicated in the past you thought that was insane.
Yeah. See, you have an issue. If you have 800,000 people on Medicaid, there are going to be some people in that are using means to seek narcotics that they shouldn't be using. And they may fill a narcotic and have it paid for by Medicaid and then fill 8 more prescriptions and pay retail. And the board had no way of seeking out that behavior, or not the board, but the pharmacists who are authorizing prior authorizations had no way of seeking that out because they weren't allowed to log in on the PMP. I could do it, but not taking care of that particular patient, that would be inappropriate.
Thank you, Doctor. I do want to get to something that you just mentioned. As I understand it, you believe opioids are necessary in the treatment of some of your patients for acute and chronic pain?
Yes,
And do you believe that the use of opioids in those patients improves their quality of life?
yes,
Do you believe it improves their functionality?
definitely.
Do you believe the benefits of their use exceeds the risk in their being prescribed to those patients?
For those patients, yes.
Doctor, I don't want you to reveal any patient identities, obviously, but can you give the court some idea of some of the patients that you see that benefit from opioid therapy?
Well, oftentimes they'll have some kind of orthopedic issue. Like I had a patient who's suffered greatly from Cushing's syndrome, which robbed his bones of calcium. And during the time when he was most affected by this, it drove him crazy. And that's an overfunction of the adrenal glands. And in the process, he had compression fractures of several vertebrae because they were weak from bone loss. Now, 20 years later, he gets along fairly well, but sometimes that pain in his back is so severe he can't sleep. And so he takes an opioid intermittently, maybe twice a week, for that severe pain, and allows him to get a night's sleep and be able to take care of his family.
And doctor, are there patients that you have had on opioids for extended periods of time?
Yes.
Can you tell the court about those patients?
Well, for instance, I had a patient with carcinoid syndrome, which is a form of cancer, and a great deal of pain. And back then, and of course limited finances, and back then the most inexpensive long-acting narcotic was methadone. And so I maintained him for years on methadone, and that greatly improved his quality of life. And he understood to take exactly how many he was supposed to take, no more, no less. But then I give him a short-acting opiate for what they call breakthrough pain. When something happens that the pain is exacerbated, they can supplement with a short-acting opiate to get short-term relief of the pain. Another patient that has Paget's disease of the bone, and her shin bone was curved like that and had to be operated and re-straightened. And she gets along fine, except it hurts like thunder to walk. So she takes a long-acting opioid in the morning. She doesn't need it at night. She just takes it in the morning, and she's able to ambulate and do her thing and get around and go to church and do all the things she needs to do.
Doctor, you mentioned several conditions there, orthopedic and one cancer condition. Does a patient with sickle cell disease hurt any less than a patient
no.
with those diseases?
Sickle disease hurt terribly, and I have maintained those patients on both short and long-acting opiates. And that allows them to function. Because unlike alcohol or Valium, it doesn't impair their ability to reason, function, do their job. It just relieves their pain.
Thank you. Doctor, that's all I have for you. Thank you very much for coming down this morning of the 3rd of July and speaking to us.
Okay?
Good morning. How are you, Doc? That was really a question.
I said fine.
Oh, I couldn't hear you. You might need to either lean up or move that mic towards you if you want to sit back like that. No problem. Have you and I ever met?
I'm sorry, what?
Have you and I ever met?
Not that I know of.
I don't think so either, but you look really familiar to me. Your brother's a lawyer in this state, isn't he?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes, you may.
You've talked to your brother about testifying in this case, haven't you?
I asked him questions, but he would only tell me, you're subpoenaed, so you got to go, and I can't talk to you about the case.
But who subpoenaed you?
I don't know. I never saw the subpoena.
I thought you said you were subpoenaed.
Well, I didn't see the subpoena. I only was told there was a subpoena. I can't even tell you who sent it.
Your Honor, can I display this?
I'm not sure what the relevance of it is. Have you seen it, Judge?
Bias.
Yeah. I will allow for it to be displayed.
Okay. Thank you, Judge. Can we mark it as court exhibits next?
Yes, we will. We'll mark it as Court's Exhibit 170.
I've known your brother a long time. That's why I said you look familiar. Clyde doesn't have the beard, though. Is Clyde your older brother or younger brother?
Older.
I can't tell, to be honest. So, but Clyde is one of the senior partners at the Crow and Dunleavy law firm here in Oklahoma City. Is that correct?
That's what I understand.
And they represent Purdue Pharmaceuticals. Is that correct?
That's what I'm told.
Yeah. And in fact, Clyde's partner, my friend Sandy Coates, is in the courtroom today, monitoring the trial. You know Sandy?
Nope.
Wave at him, Sandy, so you can see. That's Sandy Coates with Crow and Dunleavy. So, after they subpoenaed you, you called your brother.
Of course.
They wanted to take your deposition because you're on the DUR board. Is that your understanding?
That's what my understanding is, yes.
But you called your brother, right?
Yes.
And what did your brother tell you?
He said, our firm is working for the defense, and I can't talk to you about it. All I can tell you is you have a subpoena and you have to honor it.
Well, did you know no one from the law firm of Crow and Dunleavy, not your brother, not nobody, called us and told us that you had called him? Did you know that?
No.
And you didn't tell anybody from the state that you'd talked to your brother.
I said so in my deposition.
I know. I'm actually talking about, I probably asked that question very poorly. Outside of your deposition, no one, you didn't tell anybody from the state about that call, right?
No.
So, Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes, you may.
Have you given depositions and trial testimony before?
Yes.
How many times?
I don't keep track. More than 20.
More than
Less than
20.
100.
More than 20 depositions?
Yes.
And you know it's customary for a witness to be prepped by his lawyers, do you not?
No.
You don't know that? Why, yesterday in this very courtroom, we heard testimony that Purdue's former sales rep was prepped by their, I'm sorry, I asked that with the wrong company. I'm thrown off about Purdue. Yesterday in this very courtroom, we heard testimony from Johnson & Johnson's former sales rep that they had been prepped by Johnson & Johnson's lawyers for 6 days. Did you watch it or hear any of that testimony yesterday?
No.
Well, may I approach, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Is it okay if I show you this? Where we both can see it? You remember a young man representing the state of Oklahoma from the Nix Patterson firm by the name of Trey Duck?
Yes,
Where's Trey? You see that nice young man sitting right there?
yes.
You met him?
I'm sorry, what?
You met Trey?
Yeah, I did.
And he wanted to meet with you before the deposition that the defense wanted you to give in this case so that he could meet you and prepare you for your testimony. You remember that?
I remember that.
And you emailed him and said, quote, I have no interest in being, quote, prepped.
That's correct.
Is that what you wrote, Mr. Duck?
That's correct.
Are you aware of any other witness who was on a board or in some way associated with the state of Oklahoma saying, I am not going to meet with state lawyers and be prepped?
I remember them objecting to the wastage of their time.
Well,
One member resigned from the board because his time was being so wasted. He didn't want it to ever happen again.
well, was it 6 days of wastage like we heard yesterday?
No, they wanted 6 hours.
I see. Well,
That's 6 hours too long.
I see.
Mr. Witten, I'll ask you to go back to the podium.
Can I ask one more?
Uh-huh. But he can probably reference the email.
You can have
probably
our
just
copy, Doctor,
direct
if you
it to
need
him.
it.
I'll use
You can
Larry's.
have ours.
Sure.
So, you see the bottom of the email? Because it talks about the very thing you're talking about now, Doctor, where you wrote a paralegal in the Nix firm, my co-counsel, and you said, I do not want more wastage of my time. I have no desire to be, quote, prepped.
That's
Did
correct.
I read that right? So that's the second time you've said, I have no interest in being prepped for my deposition, right?
Correct.
Now, in the history of the DUR board, do you know how many DUR board members there have been?
No,
You have even an estimate?
no,
Are you aware of whether any member of the DUR board has ever said, I'm not going to meet with the lawyers representing the state of Oklahoma and I'm not going to be prepped? It's a wastage of my time.
no, I've heard them complain about it.
That wasn't my
Never heard
question.
them say they were not going to do it.
Did you hear my question?
Yes,
Will you cooperate with me just as you did with my friend, Mr. Ottaway, and answer my questions? Just my questions. Is that fair?
okay.
Are you aware of any other DUR board member who said, I'm not going to meet with the state's lawyer before my deposition and I'm not going to be prepped, in quotes?
No, I'm not aware.
And are you aware of any other DUR board member whose brother was a senior partner in a law firm representing Purdue Pharmaceutical?
I have no idea what their siblings, law firms or other business are.
Huh? Just a coincidence, huh? Is that what that is?
He's just badgering this witness.
I'm asking
No
him
good reason.
if it is a coincidence.
I'm
Next
not sure
question.
what you're asking.
I sustain.
All right, sir? So you come here today, did you meet or talk in person, on the phone, via emails, carrier pigeon, in any form? I don't care. Did you meet or talk to the attorneys or any of their paralegals from Johnson & Johnson before you walked in this courtroom today?
No.
How did you know when to come here and get here?
Carrie Hawthorne told me when.
Who is Carrie Hawthorne?
She's sitting back there. She's a member of Johnson and Hannon Law Firm, and I was retained by Integris.
I see. So she must have talked to somebody from Johnson & Johnson so that you would know you're going to be the first witness today?
I don't know who she talked to. All I know is she told me that I would be the witness at 8:30 this morning.
How did you know where to sit when you came in this courtroom?
How did I know what?
Yeah, I'm not talking about the chair you're sitting in now. How did you know where to sit and who to sit with this morning when you came into this courtroom?
Ms. Hawthorne told me.
Your Honor, may I display, I took a picture of who he sat with this morning before we started court. May I display that?
What's the relevance of that, Judge?
I think it'll be demonstrated in a moment.
I'll go ahead and allow it.
Mike, can you put up that picture? I've used my cell phone. I took that picture. Can I approach?
Yes.
Thank you. So here we are before court started. There's my friend Sandy Coates with Crow and Dunleavy. Who are these people? Those are Johnson & Johnson lawyers, are they not?
Not that I know of.
Oh, it's a coincidence you're sitting
Carrie
over there.
Hawthorne is the third, two from me there. She's retained by Integris, not Johnson & Johnson.
Well, this gentleman's Steve Johnson. He's in Larry Ottaway's law firm. Did
I
you know
have
that?
no idea. I didn't talk to him. Didn't
know
know
who-
he was sitting there and don't know who he is.
You know who that is?
Who what?
You know who this young lady is?
She's an intern with Johnson & Hannon Law Firm, and I don't know her name.
You know, this whole side of the courtroom that I'm pointing to is Johnson & Johnson's side. The state's side's right here. Did you know that?
No, I have no idea or interest.
Did you walk up and say, hello, introduce yourself to anybody with the state of Oklahoma before you got here this morning?
No.
I see. Well, let's do this. What year did you get out of medical school?
1975,
And what year did you finish your residency?
1978.
Okay. So, doctor, when you started practicing medicine, was there an opioid epidemic?
There were people abusing opioids. I don't use the term epidemic. I use that term to describe infectious disease.
Sir, do you know what an epidemic is?
Yes, I do.
There have been human beings abusing either alcohol or opioids for thousands of years. Isn't that true?
Yes, it is.
It's always been true, correct?
Correct.
So I appreciate what you said, but that wasn't my question. Let me try it again. You do know what the concept of an opioid epidemic means?
Yes.
Right? All right. Was there an opioid epidemic in this nation and in this state when you finished your residency in 1978? Yes or no?
Excuse me, Your Honor, he doesn't have to answer a question yes or no. He should be entitled to answer the question the way he wants to, as every other witness has been allowed to.
Well, that would be the responsive way. Was there an opioid epidemic in 1978?
I don't use the term that way, and so I can't relate to your question. There were people abusing opioids. There were people that came to my practice trying to get me to prescribe them opioids that they didn't need, that they were addicted to. It was going on back then, and it's going on now. I can't see the difference. I read in the newspaper about a lot of deaths, and I think that's awful, and I hope we can do something about it. But as far as people seeking opioids, I don't see any difference between now and 1980.
Doctor, you do know what an epidemic is, right?
Yes.
So you said to me, and I heard you loud and clear, that you don't like to use the term epidemic. But that's not my question. I'm asking you, very simply, was there an epidemic of opioid abuse or misuse in 1978?
I think that's a misuse of the language. I refer to epidemics as infectious disease. This is a whole other issue. There was an opioid problem then, and there is now, and I don't see any difference. But I read about a difference in the papers.
Dr. Muchmore, is there an opioid epidemic in this country and in this state today?
You're using a language a way I don't use it.
Isn't it true that the Center for Disease Control and the President Trump's administration have both recognized that there is an opioid epidemic in this country, and that would include Oklahoma?
I'm aware of that.
Okay, so do you agree that there is an opioid epidemic in this country and in the state of Oklahoma today, sir?
I believe there is an extreme problem. I don't like that use of the language, and I won't say that.
Okay. Your Honor, may I display some of the slides we've used before, the CDC?
Yeah.
Starting with
Yes,
that.
you may.
Mike, can you put up the CDC slide? Can I approach?
Yes.
Your Honor? There's been testimony in this state, or in this case, and both sides have used this slide from the Center for Disease Control. Have you seen this before?
I don't think I have.
All right, you see we have on this axis years, 1999 through 2010.
Yes.
We have numbers on the left side of the axis, right?
Yes.
Can you read this okay from where you're
Yeah,
at?
I guess for the record, Judge, I should object since this is far outside the scope of my direct examination of this witness.
Exactly.
I didn't ask a single question about this.
He's asked questions about about this issue, and I'm entitled to explore it. He's implied there's no difference today than there was in 1978. That's not or false. I'd like to demonstrate.
Your Honor, he replied to Mr. Whitman that. I didn't ask him a thing about any of this.
It would be
So it's
unjust
outside
to
the
let
scope.
that
I
stand.
overruled the objection.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You see the green line and what it means?
Yes.
It's opioid sales, and it goes up, does it not?
Yes.
Do you see the red line, which is opioid deaths, and it goes up?
Yes.
You see the blue line, opioid treatment admissions, and they go up, right?
Yes.
Would you agree with me, according to the Center for Disease Control at least, we have a marked difference from 1999 to 2010 in this chart?
Well, since it's doesn't, I don't know what the ordinate is there, it's just numbers. Can you tell me what those numbers mean?
It is the rate, and it's numerically demonstrated. My point is...
The rate of what?
Sir, do the lines go up?
Yes.
We've had expert testimony explain this. I'm merely asking you if they went up.
Okay, did
All
they
three.
go up?
Okay. There's been testimony in this case that the sale, the death rate, and the overdose rate were all flat going back until the 1920s. So I will ask you, doctor, would you dispute that?
No, I would not.
So there is a difference from the 1920s to the late 1990s and what we see post 1999, isn't there?
That's what that would demonstrate, yes.
Can you put up the blue Oklahoma-fied version, Mike? Have you ever seen this chart before?
No.
The sources are down here. This has been talked about quite a bit in this case. The blue, I will tell you, are death rates. You can see those and how they went up.
Yes.
These are from 1994 to 2016. You see that?
Yes.
The yellow line is opioid sales. Do you see what they've done from 1996 until 2016?
Yes.
As sales go up, deaths go up, right?
That's what that chart displays, yes.
As sales go down in 2014, the deaths go down, right?
Yes.
And again, we had a flat line before all this, going back to the Harrison Act in the 1920s, right?
I don't
And,
know,
Your Honor,
but
this is way
I
beyond the
accept that.
scope of anything I asked this witness.
I'll sustain the objection on
Thank
that
you.
question.
But when you got out of school in the late 70s, the sales and deaths were not high like we see post 1998. Isn't that true?
that's what that graph demonstrates.
Yeah. Well, isn't that what your experience was?
No.
I see.
My experience is no different now than it was in 1980. However, as I said before, I've read in the paper that there's a terrible amount of opioid deaths, but it's not in my experience. I haven't seen any.
Did you know that from 1996 to 2017, over 400,000 Americans have died of opioid
That's
overdose?
what I've read.
Yeah, that didn't happen before 1996, did it? There was nowhere near that number.
That's what I've read.
And indeed, do you believe what you've read?
Yeah.
Okay. And indeed, did you know over 6,100 Oklahomans have died in that period of time?
That's what I've read.
Do you accept that as true?
Yes.
And nothing like that happened before. correct? Not those kind of numbers before, correct?
That's what I've read.
Now, sir, let's talk about this. You were not retained as an expert witness by these lawyers or by Johnson & Johnson and Janssen,
That's correct.
right? And you're not coming into this courtroom today as an expert witness. Isn't that true?
That's correct.
And let's talk about the state of Oklahoma that I represent. You are not here today on behalf of the state of Oklahoma, are you?
No.
Is that why you didn't even sit with us and why you refused to talk to us?
I didn't know who us was. I didn't know what one side of the courtroom or the other was. I simply sat where I was told to sit.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's talk about the DUR board, the Drug Utilization Review Board. Let's talk about that. You're not showing up here today on behalf of that board.
No,
You're not speaking for that board.
no,
You're not speaking for all the members of that board.
no,
You're not here speaking on behalf of the governor or the legislature or the attorney general, are you?
no.
Now, you are not an expert on addiction, are you?
Well, yes, I am.
Sir, are you a board-certified addiction medicine doctor?
No,
Isn't it true, Dr. Muchmore, you are an endocrinologist,
that's correct.
and you treat diabetes, sickle cell, pituitary, thyroid, you treat those kinds of issues full-time. Isn't that true?
That's correct.
And you rarely prescribe NSAIDs because so many of your patients have diabetes or kidney problems. And NSAIDs can actually worsen that, whereas opioids actually don't harm kidney function.
That's correct.
Okay, and so let's talk about this. You were asked a question by Mr. Ottaway about whether Johnson & Johnson sales reps ever influenced you. And if I recall correctly, you said that was ridiculous or something to that effect.
Yes,
Right? Well, the truth is, in your practice, you've never seen sales reps.
I rarely see sales reps when they want to call on me individually.
Well, didn't you testify on your deposition that you don't see sales reps, nor do you read printed ads, therefore you couldn't have been influenced?
I said I scan printed ads, but I didn't say that I couldn't be aware of their influence.
You scan
Because
them? I'm sorry, is that what you said?
I said, yes, I
You
did.
scan them?
When they come in front of my face, I scan them, yes. I don't seek them out. But I deal with our pharmacists, both in the College of Pharmacy and Integris pharmacists, all the time as a part of my duties with Integris. And I am told about what is being represented by sales reps all the time.
Dr. Muchmore, I'm going to read you a question and an answer that you gave in your sworn deposition. And I would like you to listen to this, and I would like you to tell me if this was your sworn testimony under oath at your deposition. You remember your deposition, the one that you refused to meet with us before and you refused to be present?
Yes.
That's the one. This is page 203. The question, and this is by one of the lawyers for the defendant, Mr. Esan. And do you believe you were misled by drug manufacturers into writing those prescriptions for longer than 3 days? And on line 15, this is your answer. Since I have no interaction with drug manufacturers, I never see a rep. There's no way that they could have influenced me, nor do I read printed ads. Does that refresh your memory? That was your sworn testimony at that deposition.
I believe I later clarified it to say I rarely see reps, and I do no more than glance at ads.
Was that question asked you?
I think it was.
Was that your answer?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Now, the DUR board, he asked you if they can affect prescribing. You remember that question?
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand you.
I'm sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
Mr. Ottaway asked you if the DUR board can affect prescribing. Do you remember that question?
Yes,
Do you remember him asking you if you had always known that opioids were addictive?
yes.
So, I need to go back. I need to go back for a minute. Mike, can you put up the 35 boxes? Your Honor, can I display the 35 boxes of call notes, please?
What's the relevance?
Again,
I want to ask him why he's not in there.
Your Honor, again,
We went
this is
through-
way outside the scope of anything I talked to this witness about.
It's precisely in the scope because Mr. Ottaway asked him if he had ever been influenced by Johnson & Johnson. We have the whole call notes, all of them. He's not in there once.
I overruled you can't put them up. I sustain the objection.
Did you know we've gone through every call note? I don't know the exact number, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And you're not in there once as shown to be visited by Johnson & Johnson drug rep. We can't find one.
Okay.
That's consistent with your testimony that you never visited with drug reps, right?
Never is the wrong word to use.
Well, I took it from your deposition, so
Yeah, I
forgive
know.
me. But I'm happy to accept your word here today.
Rarely.
You say rarely, I'm fine, I'll accept that. But with Johnson & Johnson, will you accept this? The right word with Johnson & Johnson is never. They never visited you.
Okay.
I mean, you don't have to agree with me, but we can't find evidence of it in the records produced by Johnson & Johnson.
Sure, that's true.
Okay, so as best as you recall sitting here today, you've never been visited by a Johnson & Johnson sales rep.
Not directly, no.
Could that have something to do with the fact you are an endocrinologist?
No, not that I know of.
I see. Well, we'll leave it up to Johnson & Johnson to explain why they didn't visit you, but we both can agree they didn't visit you, right?
I make it very difficult for reps to visit me.
So, I heard Mr. Ottaway ask you this question, and I want to see if I can refresh your memory. Do you remember Mr. Ottaway saying that the state of Oklahoma says doctors are unaware of the dangers of opioids? Do you remember him asking that question?
Yes,
Now, are you under the belief that the state of Oklahoma has said every single doctor in the state of Oklahoma doesn't know the dangers of opioids?
I haven't heard that statement.
Well, that's because we never said it. No one has ever said every doctor in the state of Oklahoma is unaware of the risk of opioids. Does that sound reasonable to you?
Yes,
Now let's move on then. Have you watched or read or attended any part of this trial?
no,
Are you then unaware of the evidence that has been presented to Judge Bachman in the entirety of this trial?
I am unaware.
Thank you, sir. And you don't pretend to know what the state of Oklahoma's position really is. You just got what you know about the state of Oklahoma's position from Mr. Ottaway.
No, I got from reading the papers,
I see.
reading media.
All right. Well, would it be fair to say, because you never met with us to prepare you for your deposition, you never got it from the horse's mouth, did you?
Not from you, no.
All right. It is fair, isn't it, for us to be able to say what our position in this lawsuit is, rather than Johnson & Johnson say what our position is?
Yes,
All right, I agree. Now, let's talk about the concept of whether doctors can be influenced. Have you ever read or been made aware of studies done by doctors about the concept that doctors are human and they can be influenced by marketing just like any other human being?
vaguely recall reading such things.
All right. Do you agree with that concept? Doctors are not superhuman, are they?
No,
I love doctors. My best friend's a doctor. My daughter's a doctor. But they're humans just like you and me, right?
yes,
We all can be influenced by marketing. True?
true.
Thank you, sir. And let's talk about this. Do you know what Johnson & Johnson's annual marketing budget was to push opioids?
I have no idea.
If I told you that Johnson & Johnson, the testimony in this case has been that this does not even include their sales representatives, salaries and bonuses and things like that. Their marketing efforts in the country were $30 million a year to market opioids to doctors. Would that surprise you?
I have no point of reference, so
I see.
it doesn't surprise me, and
Uh-huh.
I've never paid attention to that sort of
Do you
thing.
think they'd spend that year after year after year if their marketing had absolutely no effect on doctors?
Well, the way you're stating that just isn't correct. They're not, that doesn't say that they're marketing to give more opioids. They're marketing to give their opioid, which is highly priced.
Doctor, did you know what you just said is demonstrably false based on some of the testimony and documents in this case?
I'm not aware of that, no.
That's just badgering.
I'm not badgering.
Yes, you
Mrs.
are.
I'll ask you the next question. And doctor, I'm trying to be just as polite as Larry, but I just heard you say that, now correct me if I'm wrong. I thought I heard you say that Johnson & Johnson is just trying to sell their own product.
No, I said that what you said, that they spent $30 million, didn't indicate that they were trying to push more people to get opioids. They were trying to get their opioid be the one that's purchased. That's all I was saying.
That's
Just saying they spent the money does not imply that they're pushing more people to take opioids.
Doctor, you're making an assumption, aren't you?
I'm just saying that what you said isn't going to get where you were trying to go. That you were trying to say they spent this money to get more people to take opioids, and all I say is, okay, they spent the money, and they would be very happy if you'd buy their opioid, but that doesn't prove they were pushing for more opioids. I am aware of no physician who said they were pushed to give more opioids. None of our clinical pharmacists are aware of anybody pushing to give more people opioids.
Dr. Muchmore, have you seen the marketing documents that we've shown the court in this case?
No.
Do you know what unbranded versus branded marketing means?
I learned that at the time of my deposition.
Yeah, you didn't know before your deposition, did you?
No.
Did you know that Johnson & Johnson did not only branded marketing for their own product, they also did unbranded marketing, trying to sell all opioids? Did you know that?
I know that they sometimes support medical articles and research, yes.
Now, that wasn't my question. Did you know they did unbranded marketing?
I don't use that term. I'm not going to say it that way.
That's been the testimony in this case. Were you aware of it?
I'm not aware of any of the testimony in this case.
Thank you, sir. And you shouldn't speculate about something you really don't know about, should you?
I didn't speculate about anything I don't know about. I simply said the error of your reasoning is if they spent this money, they must have been spending it to get more people on opioids. And I don't think that that logically follows from what you said.
But you haven't seen their marketing documents, have you?
No.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
And put up, Mike, can you put up the sales rep visits? You remember I showed you how the line of sales and deaths and overdoses went up commencing in the late 90s. You remember those charts?
Again,
Yes.
Your Honor, this is outside the scope. Their own questioning shows he's never been called on by a Janssen rep. It's just clearly outside the scope.
Overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Do you see this? This is a chart of Johnson & Johnson's sales visits. The first year on the chart is 94. The last year on the chart is 2017.
Yes.
Okay? Number of sales visits on the left. I'm not going to read all these, but you see the high numbers from 2001 to 2017, 17,000 to 20,000 visits.
Yes, I see that.
These are to doctors in Oklahoma. Did you have any idea these many sales calls were being made to doctors in Oklahoma?
Not numerically, no. I knew a lot of calls were made.
Did you know that they were targeting high decile prescribing physicians?
No.
That's what their own documents say. You're not one of those because you're an endocrinologist, right?
Not because I'm an endocrinologist, but I don't prescribe high decile opiate prescriptions.
Okay. And did you know that from 2008 to 2013, did you know that was really the peak years of the opioid epidemic in terms of deaths and overdoses in Oklahoma?
Yes, I'm aware of that.
And did you see 16,000 to 18,000 sales visits during those years?
Yes?
You didn't know those things, did you?
Not numerically, no.
You think they did that just for fun?
I'm sure they were promoting the sale of their products.
So, doctor, you told Mr. Ottaway you thought it was ridiculous that the state of Oklahoma wanted to re-educate, that's the words he used, re-educate doctors. Did I hear that right?
Yes.
And, doctor, did you know that Big Pharma, in this case specifically Johnson & Johnson, was sending sales reps who did not have medical degrees like you out to educate the doctors?
I'm aware of that.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you that. Is it equally ridiculous for Johnson & Johnson to send sales reps, like the one we saw yesterday, for example, who don't have any kind of specific medical degree? Is it equally ridiculous for them to spend millions of dollars to our state's doctors to, quote, educate those doctors? Is that just as ridiculous as what you talked about?
Yes, now you know why I don't see sales reps very often.
So Johnson & Johnson's position of spending all these millions of dollars to educate physicians, you say that's ridiculous, right?
Ask the question again. I'm not sure I understood.
I think I heard what you said. I'm just confirming. I thought I heard you say that it was ridiculous for Johnson & Johnson to send these sales reps out to educate the doctors. Did I hear that right?
No, you did not hear that right.
I thought you agreed with me and then said that's why I don't see sales reps. Did I hear that right?
You heard that right. But
Well,
I didn't say it was ridiculous for them to promote their products.
I didn't say to promote their products. You changed my words very subtly. Let me ask it again so you make sure you heard me. I said, quote, educate, because that's in their documents. There are other words, too, that I haven't told you about yet, like influence. But I'll just stick with educate, because that was the question Mr. Ottaway asked you. Okay? Is it equally ridiculous that these sales reps who are not doctors would be out spending millions of dollars to educate Oklahoma doctors on opioids?
Well, it depends on your point of view as whether it's ridiculous. From a medical education point of view, I've always thought it was ridiculous. But from their point of view of promoting their products over some other products, it's not ridiculous. It's a business decision.
You said promoting again. I didn't say promoting. I said educating. So let's just
Okay.
stick with educating. That's
Educate.
ridiculous. That's ridiculous, isn't it?
For them, it works.
Oh, it does?
From my point of view, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, that's what I thought I heard you say the first time. Then I heard you deny it, and then I heard you say it again.
No,
So
you
it is
didn't hear
ridiculous.
me right.
It is ridiculous, right?
I think it's ridiculous to send non-medical people out to educate physicians, yes.
Did I also just now hear you say it works for them?
I assume that's why they do it.
Yeah. It makes them sell more opioids, doesn't it?
I don't know. I know it would be an influence to sell more of their brand.
One reason you don't know is you haven't been here during this trial, and you haven't heard all the testimony, and you haven't seen all the documents. Is that fair?
That's correct.
Thank you, sir. Now, you told Mr. Ottaway what you knew about opioids. You said you knew they were dangerous. You remember that testimony?
Yes.
All right. Now, doctor, I'm a lawyer. Do you think I can speak for what all lawyers know?
I'm sure you can discuss it.
I didn't ask if I could discuss it, like your brother Harvey, who I call a friend. I can't speak for what he thinks. I can't speak for what he knows, can I? Just because we're lawyers. Did I say Harvey? I'm sorry, Clyde.
You know, that's
I
a
apologize.
strange way of saying things. I'm sure you and every other lawyer has talked about the knowledge of their fellow lawyers. And that's a valid thing to say, but when you say speak for them, that's different. Because you can't speak for them, but you sure speak about their knowledge.
Well, doctor, you've never met me before. You don't know what I speak about when I'm not in this courtroom, do you?
No.
You don't know what I think, do you? I don't know what your brother Clyde knows, do I? Just because we're both lawyers. Right?
That's correct.
Okay. And you graduated in 75, you finished your residency in 78. You don't know what all the younger generations of doctors know or knew about opioids. Isn't that technically true?
No, it's not true. We discuss things all the time. I'm aware of what they know and don't know. I'm a go-to person to ask questions, and so I talk with a lot of people about things they know and don't know. And I think I have a very good impression of what people know and don't know that are practicing medicine in my sphere.
Doctor, talking to you today, I have no doubt you have a very high degree of confidence that you know. But with all due respect, that wasn't my question. Without telepathy, you really don't know. I'm literally using the word know, K-N-O-W. You really don't know the specific level of knowledge that every doctor who's graduated after you did in 1975, you really don't know for sure what they know or what they were taught about opioids. Isn't that true?
Strange phraseology, I have to say. I can have a general impression of what my fellow physicians know, but I can't tell you what each individual physician knows and doesn't know or was taught.
Thank you, sir. I agree. No one can know that. So let's talk about, Mike, can you put up the DAM, the narcotic conservatism DAM? Is it okay if I display that here?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. May I approach?
Yes.
I know you've probably never seen this before, but I'll tell you,
And again,
there
Your
was,
Honor, it's outside the scope of anything I asked. I should
Overruled.
just preserve the record.
I will tell you that there was an opioid historian that testified in this case, unrebutted, I might add, that prior to a certain time, we had narcotic conservatism. And this is a metaphor. There's not really a dam that holds water back. You understand?
Yes.
But there was narcotic conservatism, which was a dam that held back opioid addiction and excessive prescribing. Have you ever heard any of this before?
No.
You don't have a degree in this field, do you?
Not specifically in addictionology, no.
You haven't researched this issue before coming here today, have you?
No.
Because if you had, perhaps they could have called you as an expert to rebut the historian, but that didn't happen, right?
No.
And did you know that before, and I'm not going to get into details, I'm asking you general principles, because the judge has already heard this. He didn't want to hear it twice, I'm sure. But prior to a certain point, doctors were taught narcotic conservatism and the dangers of opioids. And then that dam began to erode. Were you aware of that position being stated, that the dam of narcotic conservatism began to erode at a certain period of time?
No, I don't even think that's true.
Well,
I think that physicians are well aware of the dangers of opioids and are conservative in prescribing them. There are exceptions, and some of those have to be dealt with legally.
let me just stick with this, okay? Are you aware, and have you seen the documents from Johnson & Johnson that began to erode the dam of narcotic conservatism, where they were telling their sales reps to downplay risks of addiction when they made those sales calls, but build up and enhance the value of opioids? Have you seen those documents?
No, I have not seen those documents,
Testified already.
but I
I
have
haven't
seen
seen
the,
any.
Hold on.
I've
Doctor,
seen the
doctor,
information from the
Doctor, I'm going to ask Mr. Ottaway to restate his
Yes, my
objection.
objection is that misstates the evidence. It's also outside the scope.
I overruled the objection. You
Thank
may
you,
proceed
Ron.
with your answer.
Have you seen those documents that Johnson & Johnson had documents instructing their sales reps to go out and, number one, tell their doctors that they need to downplay the risks of an opioid addiction, and number two, they need to enhance the benefits of opioids.
Objection, misstates the evidence.
I overrule.
Thank you.
Have you seen
I
that?
have not seen their documents, but at the same time, our Center for Disease Control, a United States government research and a recommendation agency, was saying, hey, doctors, you're not paying enough attention to pain. Pain is the fifth vital sign. You need to treat pain. They all of a sudden were requiring us to ask every patient that comes into our office, are you having pain? Do we need to treat it? This was the government, not Johnson & Johnson. I don't know what Johnson & Johnson was saying, but that was the time frame around 1996 when they were really pushing. You've got to pay more attention to pain. So
Doctor, did you hear my question? I did
I
not
answered
ask.
your question.
No,
I said, no, I did not see Johnson & Johnson's documents. But I think it's relevant that I did see all the extreme amount of recommendations from the Center for Disease Control. Please pay attention to pain. Please treat pain. Pain is a fifth vital sign. That's what was going on, and that was a U.S. government recommendation.
Doctor, I promise you, in just a moment, I'll come back and I'll talk about the pain as the fifth vital sign. But the way this works, we kind of have to ask one question at a time and get one answer at a time. So let's put aside for just a moment. I promise you, I'll come back. Let's just talk about, I want to get a clean answer. You haven't seen those documents from Johnson & Johnson.
No, I have not.
They told their sales reps to understate the dangers of opioid addiction, but build up the benefits of opioid prescribing. You haven't seen them.
No.
And
That again misstates the evidence, but it's been asked and answered now twice.
I sustain the objection.
Thank you.
And you don't know what they said to all these doctors during these tens of thousands of sales visits because you weren't there, right?
That's correct.
And because you haven't seen the call notes that have been introduced into evidence in this case, right?
That's correct.
And you haven't even heard all the witnesses who've testified in this case. You just don't know.
That's correct.
Thank you, sir. Now, since you brought it up and you blamed the government for pain as the fifth vital sign.
Sorry, I did not blame the government. I told you what the government was saying. That's not
Dr.
blame.
Muchmore, I don't mean to make you angry. I'm happy to rephrase the question. Will you be patient with me?
Yes.
I'll be patient with you, I promise. Let's talk about pain as the fifth vital sign. Do you know who really came up with pain as the fifth vital sign?
No.
Did you know Big Pharma came up with pain as the fifth vital sign?
Objection to the form of the question, Your Honor. It's way outside the scope of anything I said.
Unfortunately,
It also misstates the evidence.
may I respond, Your Honor? Unfortunately, in a non-responsive answer, he brought it up. So I think I'm forced to deal with it.
I'm going to sustain the objection.
Okay. Well, let's talk about this briefly. When you got out of med school, let's just say 1975 to 1996, okay? Are you with me so far?
Yes.
Was there an epidemic of untreated pain?
You're using a word in the English language in a way I cannot use it. I won't say there was an epidemic, but there was a problem.
I see. Well, let's do this. Can we at least agree that pain is subjective or objective? Which one of the two?
Well, I can't feel your pain, so it has to be subjective.
Okay. And you mentioned Integris. You work for Integris?
Yes.
And hasn't Integris on their website recognized that we have an opioid crisis here in Oklahoma?
I've seen it on their website.
Do you agree with Integris's website?
I don't agree with that use of the language. I think it trivializes epidemic.
In fact, I'm looking at,
Bubonic plague was an epidemic.
well, I'm looking at the website right now, Grappling with the Epidemic in Oklahoma. Your own website, Integris, talks about there's an epidemic of opioid addiction in
I know that.
Oklahoma. You agree with that?
I agree that's what's up there.
And in fact, I don't know if you know my name or not, I'm one of the 4 people that helped found Arcadia Trails that Integris is involved with. Right? Did you know that?
No, I did not know that.
We wouldn't have done that if we didn't have an epidemic.
Right? Your Honor, that assumes facts, not evidence. It's also clearly outside scope.
Sustained.
May I have just a moment to look at my notes? Your
Yes.
Honor? Judge, like Mr. Ottaway, I'm getting a few notes from my friends too. Would you
I
mind?
see a pattern here between
Yeah.
Mr. Ottaway and Mr. Witten.
My friends write more notes than his friends. But
They're both perfectly competent to do it themselves, Your Honor, but
it's a 9:45. Might we take just a short restroom break, and maybe I can save some time by going through this?
Take a 10-minute break.
Thank you very much.
welcome back. Dr. Tolman is coming up. You may be seated. I guess that was the end of the cross. I'm kidding.
Randy, you're up.
We'll give Mr. Whitten a second.
Your Honor, the state has no more questions.
I'd like to note that it's always here waiting, Your Honor.
That is noted.
Does that count for one sarcastic comment at the end? Have I earned it already?
That's a good one.
She'll never be able to hold herself to one.
Sorry I was late, Judge.
That's all right. It's just barely 9:51. We're good.
But you'll be pleased to know that I only have one note.
You
So-
whittled it down, huh?
So that break was good. I just have one last question, Doc. Can you put up with one more?
Yes?
Thank you. So, doctor, if you put a patient on an opioid long enough, he or she has a 100% chance of getting addicted.
If the dose was significant enough to treat moderate to severe pain, yes.
So, doctor, if someone were to say to a doctor or a patient that you could take opioids at the dosage, whatever dosage you're talking about, for long enough, and they would never get addicted, in your words, that would be ridiculous too, wouldn't it?
Yes.
That's all I have, Your Honor. Pass the witness.
Thank you, Mr. Whitten.
Thank you, Doctor. Just to let you point out to the court where you talked in your deposition about getting, can you just read that answer there for the court to elaborate on what they asked you about?
It said you don't read print ads. Sometimes I scan them, but I don't pay much attention to them. That's not the proper source of information. Proper source of information is the medical literature. That's where I get my information.
Is that your testimony?
Yes, it is.
All right. Doctor, you were shown this, your brother.
Yes.
That had anything to do with testimony here today?
None.
Doctor, you were
Other than
asked.
he told me I had to obey the subpoena.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's always a good idea. That's always a good idea.
That was the question I asked him.
And since, Doctor, you have not listened to any of the testimony, you don't know whether one of the state's witnesses, Dr. Kolodny, said that every doctor in Oklahoma needs to be re-educated.
No, I do not know that.
Doctor, you were asked some questions about an email that was sent to you by a lawyer. Remember that?
Yes?
Do you have any idea why the state felt it was necessary to prep your testimony?
I found that mysterious because all I'm supposed to do is tell the truth.
And doctor, before you walked into this courtroom and I met you right out here and shook your hand, had you ever met me before?
No.
That's all I have.
Can I follow up on those?
I'll give you limited ability to do that.
Won't take long. But you met with your own lawyers, is what I thought I heard you tell me, before you came here today. You brought them here today.
I talked with Ms. Hawthorne on the phone and by email
Yeah.
after Integris told me that she would be my attorney for this.
Yeah.
I didn't seek her out. Integris assigned her to me. And so we talked about where will we meet, how will we get to Norman, how will I find the courthouse, things like that.
Well, I'm not allowed to get into what you talked about or how, But he mentioned prep as being, there being something wrong with that. Did he tell you they prepped their witness yesterday 6 days?
You mentioned that earlier.
Oh, okay.
That's all, May. Doctor, much more be excused.
Dr. Mitchmore, thank you very much. You may be
Thank you for
excused.
coming, Doctor.
All right, we're going to put exhibits into the evidence, and then we'll allow the defendants to call their next witness. But
Thank you, Doctor.
if people need to get up and stretch, whatever, while I'm doing this, that's okay. We'll do this up at the bench. You want in?
connected. Yeah, I got it. We call Dr. Kyle Toll. Oops.
Told, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. You may be seated.
Never mind. Dr. Toll, would you please say and spell your name for Ms. Thacker?
Yes, ma'am. My name is Kyle Wilson Toll, KYLEWILSONTOAL.
Turn and look at Ms. Thacker, please. Okay, you speak very quickly, as we've discussed, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
You're going to speak very slowly for her, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Otherwise, she's going to be very angry at both of us, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And me.
And
Yes.
you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Your Honor. I'm more concerned about her right now, but you'll be angry with us too. So, oh, she'll be angry
She'll
with
be
you.
angry.
I'm sorry. Yes, I was worried about you being. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm gonna go. He knows who I'm concerned about. It's okay. He knows. So she'll be angry at all of us, and we're going to try to avoid that this morning. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Can you please tell us what you do for a living?
I am a cardiothoracic surgeon.
And what is a cardiothoracic surgeon?
Cardiothoracic surgeons are certified by the American Board of Thoracic Surgery, and we operate on all the organs in the thoracic cavity, and we operate on blood vessels as well. That would include the heart, the lung, and the major blood vessels, and diseases of any of those organs.
Do you have certain surgeries that you specialize in?
Yes, I do.
Can you tell us what those are?
I'd say in frequency, probably the most frequent surgeries I do are coronary artery bypass grafts, lung resections, repair of aneurysms, and repair of damaged vessels in the extremities. And then there's a plethora of other surgeries.
And how long have you been a heart and lung surgeon?
I started my fellowship in '86, finished that in '88, and so 31 years in private practice.
And when did you graduate from medical school?
1980.
And so you've been a doctor for almost 40 years, is that correct?
Yes.
And where did you go to college?
The University of Oklahoma.
And where did you go to medical school?
The University of Oklahoma.
And why did you go to medical school?
I went to medical school, I often discuss this with medical students, and I'll try to be brief, but most people who are in the medical field have some defining moment. I came from a family of farmers and railroad workers, and so when I was 8, I had a congenital abnormality in my kidney that became apparent, and it took a while to diagnose it. It was very painful intermittently, and I had a nephrectomy, had my kidney taken out. And it was as emergency surgery, as it turns out.
Remember to use words that we can all understand and that Ms. Thacker can
Yes,
type.
ma'am.
Okay.
Yes,
So you had a surgery when you were about 8 years old?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And what about that experience made you want to become a doctor?
Well, I think it was seeing the doctors. You know, I was 8, and I can remember a tremendous amount about that surgery. 6-bed ward, who the other kids were, and they would come in and they had
Hold on, Dr. Toll,
yeah.
what did you say after you remembered a lot about
Oh,
the surgery?
it's that it was a 6-bed ward, open ward, back in the day. So I remember all the kids that were in the room with me, and it was interesting because they all had different diseases, and I was second one on the left, for example. So I remember a lot about it, but the doctors were what intrigued me the most, because they would come in twice a day with their long white coats, and everything got better.
What did you think about those doctors?
I really admired them, and yes, very much so.
And
But we didn't have any of that exposure in my family. My family was, like I say, railroad farmers, ranchers, and stuff. So.
And what made you want to become a surgeon?
So when I finished high school, my older sister was a pharmacist, was going to pharmacy school, and she was the first one in our family to go to college. So I kind of wanted to work on the railroad, and my dad wanted me to go to college, so he said, make me a deal, and I'd go to college if I'd work on the railroad if I went to college. So, and I'd already intended anyways, but yeah, to make it easier for me, he put me on a section gang on the Rock Island Railroad, and which is a gang that lays track the old-fashioned way. They're called Gandy dancers to this day. And
What are they called?
Gandy dancers.
Can you spell that for her, please?
GANDYDANCERS. And they're called Gandy dancers because if you miss the spike becomes a piece of shrapnel, and you become a Gandy dancer. So, and I did that more than once, believe me. It takes, in fact, you have to do it on your own before they let you do it in a team. So, and I think working with my hands, from that experience, I spent every summer and winter until third year medical school working on the railroad, and really enjoyed it. And there's some pride you take in working with your hands. I did anyway. I really felt that a lot. And so when it came time to pick a field, I decided surgery was the best.
And so after completing medical school, and I'm sorry, again, what year was that?
1980.
After completing medical school, did you do some postgraduate training?
Yes.
And tell us about that.
So I did residency in general surgery and vascular surgery. Back in the day, it was general vascular surgery for the first 6 years. 1 year of that was in Boston and at Massachusetts General Hospital, which is one of the Harvard hospitals. And when you're selected to do cardiac, I applied for and was selected to do cardiac. Well, part of that acceptance process is that you, at that time, went to Boston. A number of surgeons did it. I wasn't unique. They were all doing it. And then after that, so I finished that in 1986 and started my cardiac fellowship at that time, which is 2 years, and then I finished that in 1988.
So your post-medical school training is a total of 8 years?
Correct.
And 1 year of that was at Harvard?
Yes.
And do you hold any professional licenses?
Well, just MD. The board certification doesn't have a license with it, but it's I have a medical license, and then you're board certified in general surgery, and in order to take thoracic boards, obviously you have to have been board certified in general surgery.
So you have a license by the state of Oklahoma?
That's correct.
And then you said you're certified by some medical boards. When did you become board certified in general surgery?
In 1986.
And you're also board certified by the thoracic surgery?
That's correct.
And what does it mean to be board certified by those boards?
So to be board certified, you have to, of course, complete a certified residency and successfully, and then you have to sit for a written exam, which is pretty lengthy. It's an all-day exam, and then you have to pass that, and then pass an oral exam. So you have a written and oral for each specialty. And
is that something you have to keep up and retake exams?
Yes.
And have you done that continuously since you were first certified?
Yes, I have.
And do you have a DEA license?
Yes, I do.
And when did you first get that license?
In 1981.
And what are the requirements, or what were the requirements when you first got your DEA license?
Yeah. For the DEA license, it was step 1, 2, and 3 of what's called the National Board, and everybody takes that. The step 3 is given during your intern year. You also have to complete an internship, and then you apply for a DEA license.
Do you remember getting your DEA license?
Yes, I do.
And why do you remember that?
In medical school, really from starting on the third year, really or the second year even, on clinical rotations, which were my favorite by far, you would always have to hunt someone down to sign your narcotic prescription for the patient. And so you spend 3 years doing that, and everybody knows when you get your DEA license, you get to do that on your own. So it was a tremendous right to be able to do that, but it was also a tremendous responsibility.
And you in order to prescribe scheduled drugs, you have to have a DEA license, correct?
That's correct.
And do you have to renew your DEA license?
I believe so. I know you do. I've had the same office manager for like 30 years, so I know she does it, but, and I'm sure I signed something, but I'm not aware of the formalities of it.
And where do you currently practice?
Norman, Oklahoma.
And you have an office here?
Yes.
And you also have a hospital-based practice here?
Yes, it is a hospital-based practice.
And which hospitals in Norman do you practice at?
I work at Norman Regional, at the Healthplex, and at Moore. The tornado got rid of the Moore Hospital, so it's now a Moore ER complex, but I work there and see patients there also.
And you practice at both of the Norman facilities?
That's correct.
I believe you refer to them as Norman Porter and Norman Healthplex,
That's
correct?
correct.
Do you perform surgeries, see patients in the hospital, as well as cover the ER at both of the Norman hospitals?
Both Normans and then the ER at Moore.
And has your entire medical career been in the Oklahoma area?
Yes, really, all the way back to, I've been within 30 miles of where we're sitting right now since the early 60s.
Most of your life has been in Oklahoma?
That's correct.
And where did you first start your medical career?
Private practice. I joined Paul Canale and Jim Cheatham, two surgeons here in town that were mentors of mine, and we practiced out of St. Anthony's, and we had an office at Baptist also. So I was covering several hospitals, Baptist, St. Anthony's, Presbyterian, and when I first started out, I was still on staff at OU covering call and would do cases there occasionally.
And would that
Not
have been?
very often, but occasionally.
I'm sorry, doctor.
I'm
Was
sorry.
that in 1988 when you first finished your residency?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And did that practice group change over time?
Yes.
And then you just stayed with those partners for a number of years?
Yes, we joined up with a larger group, and then that merged again, and eventually became, and I'm not sure of the year, sometime in the 90s, an 8-surgeon group that had offices at several hospitals and did over close to 2,000 hearts a year, and it was a very big practice. And I had the great fortune, or misfortune, depending on your perspective, of being the youngest person in that group for about 10 or 11 years. So I'm not sure if it works that way in the law practice, but that's a lot of work.
It does, in fact, actually. And how long, now you said misfortune of being we call
Yes.
it low man, actually,
Correct.
in a law firm.
I wouldn't have traded it at all. Yes, ma'am.
And why do you think it's fortunate to be the youngest person in the group?
Well, you get to go to a lot of interesting hospitals that most people didn't want to go to, and you get a lot of ruptured aneurysms. It's not that I didn't.
Repeat that? You get
I'm sorry. You get a lot of ruptured aneurysms, which is a blood vessel in the stomach that back in the day was a very huge operation. Due to technical advances, it's very simple now, but it used to be a horrific operation. You had the opportunity to do some cases. I'll just put it that way.
Is it fair to say you think you got a lot of good experience during
Yes, I
that time
do.
period?
Yes, I do. I absolutely do.
And you covered a lot of hospitals during that time period?
Yes, ma'am.
And when did you start covering the hospitals down here in Norman?
1991, we started the heart program down here.
And when did you move exclusively down to Norman?
Well, I've always lived in Oklahoma City. My wife is an obstetrician, and it so happens that an obstetrician needs to be closer to the hospital than a cardiac surgeon, for obvious reasons to the women in the room. So
Yes, we're grateful for that, thank you.
Yes, several people in this room are probably grateful for that. She delivered close to 9,000 babies. So, so I moved down here full time sometime in 2008 or 9. As the different hospital programs grew, it became a situation where they didn't want to have to start their case at Ford. Before that, I would routinely start a case at Mercy, stop and help 2 partners at Baptist Hospital, and then come down to Norman and start an open heart surgery around 4. And so I think for staffing wise, for the hospitals, they wanted to start having their own surgeons. So each of the hospitals sort of developed a practice of having hospital-based practices. And now most of the surgeons in town are hospital-based, with the exception of a few. the cardiac surgeons.
Did we develop a couple of demonstratives to help you with your
Yes.
hospitals you've practiced at?
Yes.
So it wouldn't be such a memory test for you?
Right.
Okay. May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. I don't want to leave your board, Mr. Beckler. If you want me to leave the board or go on. I don't want to touch you. I know you feel how you feel about people touching you.
It's the screen.
I'm sorry, it's the screen. The screen board, well, I just want the doctor to be able to see that. Oh. I've been wondering what those were.
Is that good?
Yeah, if you can see it, that's fine. Can I?
Yes, you may.
Sorry, thank you. The screen. Do you see that, Doctor?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, we've made a demonstrative of the greater Oklahoma City area here, and I believe we counted them up yesterday, Doctor, and there's 17 hospitals that you've had.
Yes, ma'am.
Active and full privileges.
Yes, ma'am. For most of the time of the 30 years, I was at most of those until I went to Norman.
Okay. And can you tell the court what active and full privileges mean?
Active and full privileges means you're required to go to meetings and you cover call and you can see patients there, you can admit patients and basically aware of what their practices are and yes, that's it.
Okay. When you're turning to me, make sure you're still speaking clearly so Ms. Thaggart can hear you, okay?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
So this is where you're seeing patients in the ER, where you're performing surgeries, and then following up with patients afterwards, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
In truth, some of them I didn't do very many surgeries at, but I did surgeries at all of these hospitals we're about to discuss.
Okay. So if Ms. Conway can help us, since I don't have the touchscreen on this. So we've got, the first one is Integris Baptist Medical Center.
Yes.
Okay, these are not in the order necessarily.
Correct. They're
Okay.
not chronological.
Okay.
but
And what's the next
I
one?
could do it that way, but it would be harder.
Okay. Next one we have is,
Norman Regional.
okay, and what do we have after that? Let's see.
That's the Healthplex or the Heart Hospital.
Okay,
That's Norman Regional More. That's the ER. That was a hospital at one time, but I cover that ER. I do not operate there.
okay.
Mercy Hospital,
What's that?
St. Anthony Hospital, Integris Southwest Medical Center, which was South Community, Oklahoma Heart Hospital, the Integris Health Admin. That's now Integris Deaconess, I believe. It's Deaconess Hospital.
Okay.
These are like golf tournaments. They all have front names.
Good.
Yeah, Alliance Health Midwest City, Bethany Hospital, OU Medical Center, of course, the VA Hospital at the health campus, and Children's Hospital, the Hillcrest Hospital. That's no longer a hospital now, but yes, that
But it
one.
was when you were
Oh,
there.
yes, had an ER and
Yep.
surgery, had a nice surgery. Presbyterian Hospital.
I think that maybe,
And that may-
yeah.
okay.
And Presbyterian Hospital is now part of the,
Yes, Presbyterian is the OU Medical Center, and OU Medical Center is now Children's Hospital, and the old Children's Hospital, I think, is part of the rehab.
yeah.
But,
But back when you were there, they were all separate
Yes, ma'am.
facilities? Okay.
Doctor, I have a question. What's the name of the hospital? I thought it was the Oklahoma Heart Hospital that's out on 240
That-
Sooner.
That is right, and that was the only one I haven't worked at, and it was built after I became exclusively in Norman.
Is it also the Oklahoma Heart Hospital?
Yes, sir. Yes, it's the Heart South is what we call it in the professions.
Yeah.
Heart South and Heart North.
Some of these have changed names since you were
Yes, they
there.
have.
Okay. Now, we talk about, and again, I counted them up, there were 17 of them, I think, that you have worked at
Yes,
over
ma'am.
the years, over the almost 40 years. I know you're a big fan of me saying that over and over again, aren't you?
Yes,
So-
yeah.
But don't worry, because Mr. Ottaway is still older than you, and I'll say that a couple of times just to try to get a rise out of him. But-
Objection.
Overruled.
Thank you, Judge. But you practiced at these 17 hospitals over the years, and when I say practice at, covered ER, went to
Right.
the OR.
Made rounds, talked
Made
to
rounds.
doctors. Yes, ma'am.
And if you practiced alongside Oklahoma doctors at all these facilities?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Ms. Conway, can we go to the next slide, please? Now, you've had patients from all over Oklahoma, haven't you?
Virtually every town I can think of.
Okay. And we did a demonstrative here, and we're not trying to cover every city
Correct.
in the Oklahoma that you went to, but we just grabbed some representatives, cities,
Yes.
right? Okay, so let's go through this.
Stillwater, yes. Elk City, of course. Claremore, Durant, Beaver, yes. Oklahoma City, of course. Ponca City, Poto, one of my, Woodward, and Antlers. I also had Broken Bow, that's even further over there. But
You got someone from, okay, we didn't get
Yeah.
Broken Bow on here, but you have someone from Broken Bow?
Yes, well, in fact, I've got patients call me and say that this didn't make the list. But so really all these, in fact, I would almost say every named city on there, with the exception of some in the Panhandle, but Ardmore, and then Tulsa, and Altus, yes.
And of course, Norman.
Norman, yes.
I didn't ask you, and I should have, since Mr. Witten is from Seminole, have you had a patient from Seminole?
Yes.
Okay.
Not me.
No.
Not yet.
It's a great town, actually. I call it the Seminole Mafia. We have several friends from Seminole.
Okay.
But they run the state.
Thank you, doctor. Now, you've already mentioned your wife, who's an OBGYN. Do you have other family members who are doctors?
Yes, ma'am.
Tell us about those.
So my twin sister married a pre-med student when we were all in college, and he became an OBGYN. His father was a general practitioner in Midwest City. I married an obstetrician, which is a little weird that twins both married OBGYNs. But, and then going the other way down, my sister's 3 children are doctors. She has 2 physician MDs and 1 dentist. And then my daughter is a physician as well in residency.
She's also an OBGYN,
Yes,
correct?
she's an OBGYN, right.
So you're sort of the black sheep of the family, aren't you?
I am, indeed.
And did all the other doctors in your family attend OU Medical School?
Yes, they did.
So I want to talk to you a little bit more about your medical practice. Tell the court how patients come to see you.
Patients can come to see me, and this has been true really from the beginning. They can come to see me through the emergency room, through a consult from a physician in the hospital. They can call my office and make an appointment directly. You do not need a physician referral. We get referrals from other physicians as well. Occasionally I get referrals from other thoracic surgeons when there's insurance issues or things like that.
And the hospital consults that you see, are they sometimes patients that are referred through the ER?
Yes, they are.
And tell us what kind of patients you would get calls from the ER for.
The ER cases tend to be, of course, emergencies, and usually they're dealing with blood vessels that are occluded and an extremity is at risk, or it has ruptured and they're bleeding internally. The other ones would be trauma. There also can be organs that rupture, like the lung, and we admit those patients. At Norman, and I think in Oklahoma City in general, the thoracic service admits all multiple trauma. So sometimes a patient can be injured and they need one physician to oversee the trauma care. And even if there's no thoracic injury, we will admit that patient and coordinate the care.
Let's talk about the patient that you see at the ER that has a chest trauma. What type of care would you provide that patient?
We would admit, the first thing we do is make sure there's no serious organ injury. So that takes a series of scans and tests and serial exams where we're watching the patient over a period of time to see how they progress. And then we're in charge of their medication, either continuing home medication or providing medication for them while they're in the hospital, and treatments.
Do some of those patients require surgery, either emergent or otherwise?
Yes, they do.
And do you start any of those patients on pain relief?
Yes, we do. Of course, everybody that goes to surgery gets pain relief, but sometimes you're waiting for surgery. For example, in a really bad injury, rodeo injuries and such like that, you'll have to give them pain relief at the minute you see them. automobile wrecks would be the same. But yes, even with ruptured aneurysms, as a matter of fact. So yes, a lot of them will require pain medicine.
What type of pain relief do you provide patients in the emergency room?
Generally, we use intravenous because they are not allowed to have anything to eat or drink and even if we admit them on observation, we put them on intravenous narcotics. I guess the word is opioids now, but we don't use narcotics anymore.
And is that a decision you make in your medical judgment based on a patient-by-patient situation?
That's correct.
Now, let's shift to the patients you're seeing in the hospital. Do you have a role in treating and managing their pain?
Yes.
And what role do you have in treating their pain?
We will provide the medication they need. The basic rule is if they can't eat, you provide it through the IV. And if they can't eat, you trial oral. If they have reactions to the medicines, we try alternate medicines if we can. A lot of our patients are at risk for kidney problems, so most non-steroidals are not very good, so we tend to rely on some form of opioid. But we tailor it to each patient. They're all different.
And why is pain management important for patients you see in the hospital?
Pain management is critically important for surgery patients. A number of complications can occur if you don't provide pain relief. Our rule is get up, move, walk, get up, move, walk, and you can't do that if you're hurting. And so quite simply, we have to relieve their pain. We are quite honest with them, though, that we can't remove all the pain. We have to really just get them enough to get up and move. And then the very act of moving, I think, is a pain reliever, my own practice and experience.
Now let's move to the patients you see in your office. Do those patients, does your treatment of them typically involve managing and treating pain?
When I see patients in the office, usually not ones that I'm seeing preoperatively. Postoperatively, though, I'm still interested in their pain control and management.
And what types of pain relief do you provide patients that you see in your office?
Well, most people, when they finish their surgery, they're on oral pain medicines. And not all of them take opioids. A lot of people don't like opioids, or they have a reaction to them, and we'll use a different form of medicine on that if we can, or a different form of an opioid. When we see them back, we will evaluate their pain. That's actually the last question I ask all of them. How are you doing? How many pills do you have left? And then most everybody is off pain medicines at that time, and a few will need more, and we'll discuss with them the nature of that. I think it's very important to involve the patient in that, and we'll sometimes write a prescription for 1/2 of the amount that they've got going home, and we will use that. I will tell them that they're going to use these pills to get off, so we'll have a plan to get off the opioids at that time and see them back.
And what is your typical practice for a patient who requires additional pain relief at that follow-up visit 4 weeks post-op?
Yeah. So when we see them back, and again, it's a tiny fraction of the patients, but we will see them back 2 weeks later, and if they've still not managed to be off the opioids, we will refer them to pain management at that time.
And why do you send that small percentage of your patients to pain management?
The thoracic cavity is unlike any other, and it's very prone to develop chronic pain from acute pain. I tell my surgical friends they're fortunate if they don't operate on the thoracic cavity because it is the most sensitive part of the body, and I can prove it that men can wear wool slacks to church in August in Oklahoma, but they have yet to invent a wool t-shirt.
Now, how often in your practice do you consult with other doctors?
Every day or several times an hour sometimes.
And those consultations, where do they occur?
Well, using the term consultation, I call it a consultation when I just ask a friend, there's 8 cardiac surgeons in Oklahoma City, maybe more, but there's 8 that we all train kind of right in a row, so we've known each other for decades. And if I have a question or a tough case, I will call them. But otherwise, the consultations come from the phone physicians. But there's a formal and an informal consultation would be the best way to answer that. And I do both quite frequently.
And maybe, I know doctors use the term consultation when you ask another doctor a question.
Yes,
but
ma'am.
Could it also be just talking to the doctors you work around?
Yes, ma'am.
So in the ER, there's other doctors around you, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And you talk to those doctors when you said, I think, hourly?
If I'm in the ER, it's kind of a go situation in the ER, and so we're communicating in real time frequently.
And then in the OR, do you also speak with other doctors?
That's
hourly,
correct.
daily?
That's correct. The same situation in the OR. It's a team, and we'll converse. It sounds like a battlefield because everything's verbal recognition. So when you talk to each other, you say back what you just heard, and we never assume.
And that's something that you do every day,
Every
all
day.
the time?
All the time, all hours,
Yeah.
all days.
I think lawyers feel like we work all the time, but I think that's probably nothing compared to what doctors really work.
Yes, it's the sporadic nature of it in medicine. I think you can get slaughtered, probably that way in law too, and then you have 2 days where you're not doing anything. So.
Well, I'm not sure we remember what 2 days off is like, so I think we're all looking forward
Nobody
to
in this
it.
room, from what I can tell, nobody in this room does.
So how big is your network of doctors that you speak with?
Large, gosh, I don't know if I could put a number on it, but it's a lot.
And in your interactions with this network of doctors, do you learn things about how these doctors treat patients?
Yes,
And do you learn how other Oklahoma doctors prescribing practices?
yes,
Does this include learning about other Oklahoma doctors' practices with opioids?
yes,
Do you consider yourself an expert in the field of cardiothoracic surgery?
yes, I do.
Do you consider yourself an expert in treating pain associated with cardiothoracic surgery?
Yes, I do.
Do you consider yourself an expert in the role of opioid medicines in treating the pain associated with cardiothoracic surgery?
Yes, I do.
Do you consider yourself an expert in the medical care of patients who've experienced chest trauma?
Yes, I do.
Sorry, I'm getting the eye. I know, now it's my fault. Oh, you're right. You're right to criticize. Do you
Sorry.
consider yourself an expert in the role of opioid medicines for patients who have experienced chest trauma?
Yes, I do.
Do you consider yourself an expert in the standards, customs, and practices of Oklahoma doctors?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Your Honor, I'd like to offer Dr. Toll as an expert in the areas of cardiothoracic surgery, the treatment and management of pain associated with chest trauma, and cardiothoracic surgery, including the role of opioids in the treatment and management of that, in the standards, customs, and practices of Oklahoma doctors, including how they practice medicine.
Absolutely no objection.
Dr. Toll will be recognized and allowed to offer expert testimony in all those areas.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, Dr. Toll, how many people would you estimate you've performed cardiothoracic surgery on?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Sure. How many people would you estimate you've performed cardiothoracic surgery on?
Cardiothoracic, so a few thousand.
Okay. And we cheated on this because I asked you to estimate how many people you performed it on yearly. Can you do that for me?
Yeah, so just operations I do in a year are roughly, I used to do around 400, I do around 200 now. So that's all operations. Now the bulk of those are cardiothoracic. I think that's fair.
And I did the math on that, and the math on that is somewhere between 12,000 and 15,000 in your career. Does that sound right?
That could be
Okay. And what percentage of those people live here in Oklahoma?
99%.
Can you explain your approach, how you approach pain management with respect to the average cardiothoracic surgery patient, if there's such a thing as the average patient?
So in general, my acute plan is we use IV opioids during surgery and then after surgery. When they can eat, we switch them to oral opioids. If they have an adverse reaction to an opioid or if they don't like the way it makes them feel, we'll try to switch around to another oral agent. Many patients, Oklahomans are tough many patients don't need any opioids. Maybe you can manage those people with Tylenol if you need to.
When you say many patients don't need any opioids, are you saying during the entire procedure or post-operative?
No, every patient gets opioids, every single one of them. I'm talking now as they recover from the surgery. I think I've never seen any two people recover exactly the same, so we tailor it to the individual patient.
And do you consider a patient's risk factors preoperatively when coming up with the pain management plan for a patient?
Yes, ma'am. We ask them about any history of psychiatric illness, previous use, those kind of things. Usually we have family members. Cardiothoracic surgery is a field that a lot of family members come with the patient, and that helps a lot also. And I think it's vital in the process of asking them about risk factors, it gives you an opportunity to explain to them that they're going to hurt and they're going to need to move and they're going to need to have the pain relieved.
And why is the treatment of pain an important part of the recovery?
There's many complications that occur if they don't breathe deep and move. You can get blood clots in your leg, you can get pneumonia, you can get fluid around your lung. The number one complication that most of the surgeries I do is pulmonary, is lung. And all the lung functions it's necessary to relieve pain in order for them to work properly.
Are pulmonary complications serious?
Yes, they are.
And you said not all your patients receive pain medications post-operatively.
That's correct.
And what pain medications do you prescribe post-operatively?
We'll use IV morphine or IV fentanyl, and then when we can get them onto oral, for the last couple of decades, I've used Oxy-IR. The main reason is that it's not combined with a non-steroidal, so you can tailor it a little bit better, and you can also give more if you need to.
Do you also use NSAIDs for some patients?
Yes, and again, Oxy-IR, the reason I like it is you can give Oxy-IR with Aleve, for example, if that's the one the patient likes, or Tylenol. Prior to a few decades ago, all of the pain medicines came with Tylenol, and so you really didn't have a choice except to give Tylenol. So, and Tylenol can be very dangerous in large amounts, so you were able to save them that difficulty.
What's the danger of Tylenol in large amounts?
Liver failure.
You mentioned oxycodone. Have you also used the Duragesic patch in any of your patients?
Yes, I have.
How often?
Not very often. It's a narrow window. These are people that usually are in car wrecks or their trauma or their major surgery who have pulmonary complications, and you're not going to extubate them. And you have a few choices, and Duragesic fits very nicely for a variety of reasons in that patient.
Have you ever prescribed Nucentin to any of your patients?
I have not.
Have you ever used Tramadol?
Yes.
What's your experience with Tramadol?
It's very favorable. It's a little less opioid effect as far as pain relief, but a lot of people get zonked on stronger medicines, and so it's not quite as firm that way. It seems to me to have less nausea, and as I tell people, you get a free antidepressant because it has an antidepressant effect with it as well. So it's like taking 2 pills at once.
Overall, how many patients have you prescribed opioids?
How many patients? Thousands.
And how do you educate your patients about opioids?
We tell them we're going to use them. They are dangerous. They are potentially addictive. We're going to get them off of them, and they're necessary.
And why are they necessary?
For function and for recovery, And it also, if you eliminate enough complications, you affect mortality. Now, our mortalities are awfully low, but if you look at all the complications that kill people, a lot of them are directly related to not having enough pain relief.
Now, is it your purpose of using pain medication to cure all the pain from a cardiothoracic surgery?
No,
Do you
just
tell-
enough to get them up moving.
Do you tell patients that?
Yes,
Do you consider opioids safe and effective when used properly?
yes,
And do you consider opioids necessary for post-operative pain in your line of work?
It's not necessary in the term that I do have patients that don't need it, but for most patients it's necessary, yes.
Do you consider opioids necessary for surgery in your
Yes, I
line of work?
do.
Could you perform surgery and treat patients without prescribing them opioids?
I would not want to, but if you told me a tornado took out all the opioids, I guess, and you had to, it's going to be a day or two and you have an emergency surgery to do, you could do it. You could give them medicines to paralyze them and you wouldn't be able to relieve their pain, but you have things you can give them to lessen it, and then you would have to keep that patient intubated, obviously, until the opioids showed up or they got well enough to extubate on their own.
Could you provide the same level of care
No.
you can today?
No, not at all.
You mentioned that a certain percentage of your patients that have acute pain transition into chronic pain.
That's correct.
And if in certain percentage of the patients, if acute pain goes untreated, does it become chronic pain?
Yes, because my definition of chronic pain is if it is bothersome enough to require opioids at 4 to 6 weeks after surgery. And I think they're in the process of developing chronic pain, and I will then refer them. But I've never been entirely clear on the whole, when does it convert from one to the other? It's more that they don't stop. There's a second group that comes back with chronic pain, and I again send those people to pain management. The thoracic cavity those are usually people that have hurt the whole time. They just haven't bothered to complain about it, but it's not getting better, and they come back. So yes, and they did not hurt before surgery, and they do hurt now 8 months later, so that's chronic pain.
Why don't you use other pharmaceutical products exclusively instead of opioids to relieve pain?
I don't find the relief is as good with other agents. If you look at the CDC guidelines for chronic pain, they don't really have CDC guidelines for acute pain. They have recommendations, but they kind of match up in that, yes, there's a certain period of time after surgery that you really, really need to use opioids. And again, every patient that is put to sleep gets opioids. But we will try, if it's someone that they say that their pain level is such, and we will try to move them off of opioids. Opioids do have side effects on the GI tract, for example, and the way they make them feel, so it just depends on the patient.
Now, other than your surgery patients, you said there's other patients that you use opioids on, correct? Or you prescribe opioids for?
Yes,
Trauma patients, for example?
that's correct.
Now, you also treat patients that are taking opioids for chronic pain, correct?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And how do you treat them differently when they're already taking an opioid for chronic pain?
Right. So the protocol for patients on chronic pain is different. And the way I try to explain it to the patients is, if this is the window where you no longer breathe from the amount of opioids you've been given, and this is where your pain threshold starts. Someone who has never had any opioids, or a lot of dirt farmers from El Reno, they were down here all the time because they just put up with the pain, and you can give them a lot of pain relief before you get to the point where you're putting them to sleep. And the people who are on chronic opioids tend to have a hyperalgesia to where they're up a little bit more, so and they're not hurting here, they're comfortable. But when you give them opioids, you have less room to move to where they become respiratory depressed. And a good example that I teach medical students is you'll go in to wake the patient up and they'll tell you, "Doc, it's killing me." And you'll say, "What's the pain?" And they'll say, "It's an 11 out of 10. And we have to have a talk with them at that point and say, "Look, we can't just keep you knocked out. We've got to try some other things." We do have a pharmacy consult we use in that situation, and we'll try some other things like benzodiazepines or some other types of medicines, anti-anxiety type medicines, and antidepressants have been known to potentiate some pain meds. So it's a little complicated, but that's how we manage it. It's tough, I gotta say. Those are very tough patients to take care of. But we do it successfully.
And each patient is different, and each patient has a different pain tolerance, correct?
That's correct.
You know, my favorite joke is that Mr. Ottaway and I have different pain tolerances, correct?
That's correct. Everybody in this room has a different pain.
I think you could probably guess.
She's an inflictor and I'm a recipient.
You might guess who has the higher pain tolerance between the two of us. Yes.
Yes.
And do you also treat patients who are prior addicts, addicted
ma'am.
to whatever
Yes, ma'am.
substance, correct?
Correct.
And how do you treat those patients?
Okay, they're a little bit different. And it really is, I don't distinguish trauma versus surgery, so everybody's going to need opioid pain relief if you can. And I have to have a long talk with them about the fact that we're going to need to use opioids to put them to sleep for the surgery, for one thing. And they could possibly need them after surgery. I am a little more aggressive about trying to get them off because all of those patients will go home on no opioids. We use them to relieve their pain during the hospital stay and to get them moving safely. But none of those patients go home on opioids. And it sometimes delays their discharge, but we have to do that to try to, it's not safe to send them home. And they don't want to, by the way.
Now, doctor, do you understand there are risks, what do you understand the risk of opioid medicines to be?
Abuse, tolerance, addiction are all possible.
And you understand it's a Schedule II narcotic?
That's correct.
And how did you become aware of the risk of abuse, misuse, and addiction with opioids?
Well, we knew about them. Those of us that can remember back in the 60s and 70s, there was Jimi Hendrix and people dying from drug overdoses. So, but then in medical school you're taught about it. I'm in started medical school in '76, and we're taught about opioids. And then you get a healthy respect for them while you wait for the DEA license.
Have you ever reviewed the FDA-approved labels over the years?
Yes, I have.
Do you believe the benefits of opioids to treat post-operative pain outweigh the risk of addiction, abuse, and misuse?
Yes, I do.
How many of the thousands of patients you've prescribed opioids to post-surgery, how many have become addicted to opioids to your knowledge?
None.
If I understand your testimony, you only see the patients for 2 to 4 weeks after surgery. What's the basis for your knowledge that not one of your patients have become addicted?
Well, we keep tabs on them, and everybody that I see was referred to me, and most everybody I see, I know their family and speaking relations with them. I've never heard of a patient being addicted to any of the acute opioids that I've used. And I talk to all the doctors on a quite frequent basis about a variety of things, and I think I would hear back. Is it possible that one slipped through? Yes, I suppose so, but I don't think so.
Many of the patients you see are referred to you from other doctors?
That's correct.
And you keep in
Yeah,
communication with those doctors?
Right, and these are all doctors that sit, we have many mutual patients together. We'll speak together quite frequently. Yes.
Now let's turn to your opinions about Oklahoma doctors. Dr. Toll, have you been, now this trial's been going on since May, we're now in July, so it's been
Yes,
a
ma'am.
while, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You've been continuing to perform surgeries here in Norman?
Yes, ma'am.
You've been continuing to have your office practice?
That's correct,
Okay.
just this week.
You did a surgery on Monday, didn't you?
That's correct.
Okay. But despite that, you have been following some of the trial, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I've given you some transcripts to read, haven't I?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You've also watched some of the testimony, correct?
Yes, I have.
I understand. I didn't know this, but I understand you can. It's actually taped, and you can watch it afterwards, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, are you familiar with some opinions offered by Dr. Maslam-Deuce, Dr. Kolodny, and Mr. Stone in this case?
Yes.
And have you heard those witnesses offer opinions about how doctors practice medicine in Oklahoma?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And do you have some opinions about what those witnesses said in this case?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Do you recall Renzai Stone's testimony that Oklahoma doctors are not educated about the risk of opioids?
Yes, I do.
Do you agree with Mr. Stone's
I do
testimony?
not. 100% do not.
Okay. What's your opinion about what Mr. Stone said about that?
My opinion would be that, well, he's uninformed, obviously, and it was very offensive to me, embarrassing to a certain degree that someone would think that of a healthcare professional. I know these people. I know all of them that I work with, and I know what they think and how they treat patients, and I know that's not the case.
Do you believe that Oklahoma doctors know that opioids are dangerous drugs that need to be carefully and safely prescribed?
Yes, I do.
Do you recall Dr. Kolodny's testimony that the HCAP surveys resulted in hospital administrators encouraging aggressive prescribing of opioids?
Yes, I do.
Do you know what the HCAP survey is?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know what HCAP stands for, but I know about the survey.
Yeah, I couldn't probably come up with it here off the top of my head either.
Yes, ma'am.
I do have it written down. It's the Hospital Consumer Assessment of Healthcare Providers and Systems. Does that sound correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And do you agree with Dr. Kolodny's opinions regarding the HCAP survey with respect to the hospitals you practiced here, the 17 that I listed?
That, with his opinion on the HCAP survey?
Respect to the hospitals you practiced in?
I think they did have hospital surveys. Is that
No,
the question?
I'm sorry, to his opinion.
Well, his opinion on the pain part was that I disagree wholeheartedly with that. I worked during the period of that HCAP, so-called pain is the fifth vital sign. I never heard that. I never had, in all the floors I worked on, I never had a nurse administrator, a hospital administrator come up to me and say, hey, we need these HCAP scores up, you need to start giving more pain medicines.
None of those people told you to prescribe more opioids to get a better score on the HCAP survey?
No, I never ever heard that.
Do you recall Dr. Maslam-Deuce and Dr. Kolodny's testimony regarding the impact of sales representatives on Oklahoma doctors?
I do.
Okay. Have you ever met with a sales representative of a pharmaceutical company?
Yes, I have.
Have you ever met with a sales representative promoting an opioid product?
Not to my knowledge.
What role do sales representatives play in your practice?
In my practice, there's two types of sales representatives. There's surgical device representatives. These would be tools we can use in the OR to help patients. And then there are pharmacological, pharmaceutical company representatives who will be talking about drugs they use.
Let's put the medical device representatives aside for the moment.
Yes, ma'am.
Talk about the pharmaceutical reps. What role do the pharmaceutical representatives play?
Pharmaceutical reps are there to tell you about their product, tell you if there are any innovations or changed indications for that medicine. If it's an old medicine, if it's a new medicine, they're there to tell you about what the medicine is to do, basically why they think you ought to consider using it.
Has any sales representative from a pharmaceutical company ever influenced your prescribing decision regarding opioids?
Never.
Has any pharmaceutical representative ever influenced your prescribing decision regarding any medication?
Never.
What do you do when you get information from a pharmaceutical sales representative?
Their job is to develop the medicines and tell you about the medicines. My job is to use them safely. It's equivalent to everything else that happens in my practice. I mean, I have a lot of different things I use. My job is to use it safely. Someone else's job is to make the device or the pill. And then after they make it, it's my job to make sure that it's safe. And that's the job of every doctor in the United States of America.
Who makes the final decision about the risk and benefits of the medication with respect to a particular patient?
The doctor with the patient.
Based on your experience, why do you disagree with Dr. Maslam-Deuce and Dr. Kolodny's opinions that Oklahoma doctors are influenced by sales representatives?
I disagree with that because I know that it's never happened to me, and I know these doctors, I know how they work. Since this lawsuit has come up, I've taken more of a point to bring up the fact that are they influenced by pharmacy reps? I would say 80% of them, after they quit laughing, will tell me that no, they don't. And I happen to know how these people work. The situations I'm in make it impossible for me not to know how they work, what they think, and what's important to them.
Are you aware of any other doctor in your network of doctors that has ever had his or her prescribing decisions regarding opioids impacted by a sales representative?
No.
Do you recall Dr. Maslam-Deuce's opinion that Oklahoma doctors do not even review FDA-approved labels when prescribing opioids?
I do.
Do you agree with that opinion?
No, I do not agree with that at all, and I think it's silly to say that.
Why not?
Okay, box warnings or black box warnings are very important when you prescribe a medicine for a patient, and it's your responsibility to do that. It's Dr. Maslam-Deuce testified that it was legalese and that it was like signing something on a phone app. And I guess that's a millennial term, but I can tell you that the millennial doctors I know do not think that way. It is very important to know that what the contraindications are for a medicine, what potential adverse effects you can have from that medicine. I find it astonishing that any doctor would dare suggest that they're not useful.
Is it a physician's responsibility to know what's in the FDA-approved
It's
label?
100% the physician's responsibility.
And, Doctor, you'll agree you're not a millennial?
That's correct. I know a lot of millennials.
You practice with them?
Yes, I do.
And you speak to them?
I do, and I'll say this about them. They're flippin' brilliant. I mean, they learn things really quick, and some of the best doctors I know are millennials.
And you practice with them, you know them?
Absolutely.
And you're confident they know what's in the FDA-approved label?
That's true. I helped raise one, as a matter of fact.
And I'll go ahead and ask you, she's the smartest doctor in your family?
Yes, she is. And,
You're under oath now.
I am absolutely under oath.
Okay.
I mean, she's brilliant. I mean, yes, sir, Your Honor.
Do you recall Dr. Maslam-Deuce's testimony regarding the effect of a single injection of fentanyl?
I do.
Okay. And do you agree with Dr. Maslam-Deuce that a single injection of fentanyl will increase sensitivity in the region of the pain effective?
I do not.
Why do you disagree with Dr. Maslam-Deuce?
He's quoting a study by Lee that was in one of the pain journals in 2011. It was a big meta-analysis, and there's several studies mentioned in there. One of them is indeed a pain tolerance. The two medicines that were used for that were morphine and the hydromorphone. And so fentanyl was not used in any of the studies. So I think he was conflating the studies and misquoting the studies. But the morphine study did have a brief period of hyperalgesia, but it quickly went away. And as Dr. Lee pointed out, the hyperalgesia research is on the subject of tolerance. It doesn't have anything to do as a side effect. I've never seen in 40 years a case of acute hyperalgesia, and it was my impression that Dr. Maslam-Deuce was trying to use this literature to say why opioids were not safe drugs to give, and that's just not true. He was misrepresenting the fact and misquoting the study.
Finally, have you ever heard any Oklahoma doctor express the view that opioids were not addictive?
I have never heard that, and never will.
Did you get a phone call from one of your former colleagues from Harvard about that?
Yes, I did.
What did he say to you?
It was
Your Honor, I know nothing about this phone call. It's rank hearsay objected.
Your Honor, experts can rely on hearsay under the Oklahoma rules as long as it doesn't confuse the fact finder. I doubt you'll be confused by this, Your Honor.
Experts can rely upon the type of things experts rely upon. This is not one of them. He's not here. I can't cross-examine him. I object to that.
Your Honor, as long as the rule says, as long as the fact finder is not confused by it, you can rely upon the hearsay.
I overrule the objection.
It was embarrassing. I had to tell him that no, doctors in Oklahoma don't listen to the pharmacy reps, and they actually do prescribe independently, and I'll let him have it again next time I see him, but yes.
And doctor, do you hold all your opinions to a reasonable degree of medical and scientific certainty?
Yes, I do.
Thank you for your time. Please answer Mr. Whitten's questions.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. And Mr. Whitten, you're recognized for cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning.
Morning.
Well, I got to meet you a few minutes before you got on the witness stand.
Yes, sir.
This morning. You and I have a very dear friend in common, Dr. John Randolph at the Oklahoma Heart Hospital.
That's 100% correct.
I'll tell you how I knew about that. I called John because I saw your name on the witness list. We didn't take your deposition, and I asked him about you, and he said you were, along with me, you were one of his top 3 friends for decades and decades.
He called and told me the exact same thing, sir.
Yeah, so that's very high praise. I just say that by way of introduction.
Yes, sir.
So, let me ask you a couple of questions. I'm guessing you and I are about the same age.
Class of 73.
Yep. I guessed that because of
Yes,
Randolph.
that's right.
So, we're both about 64.
Correct.
You are a cardiothoracic surgeon.
Correct.
And I am a civil trial lawyer. Sounds
Yes.
like we have things that we do, we kind of specialize in, both of us.
Yes, sir.
For example, I've never handled a criminal case in my life. I think it would be very dangerous to my client if I started now doing it.
That's correct.
You don't deliver babies.
No, that's correct.
Would it be a fair statement? It sounds like you're a really busy cardiothoracic surgeon, and you have been since you got out of your residence.
I'm not as busy now as I was when I was younger, but
Sure.
Yes.
I wish I could say that. I'm busier now than
Right.
when I was younger. But my point is, you have really been busy cracking open a lot of chests.
Yes, sir.
You're a heart guy.
Correct.
That's your specialty.
Correct.
That's how you put bread on your table. You've been treating people with, you're a heart surgeon.
Yes.
And you've been doing that.
Yes.
So let me ask you a question. I travel around this state talking about addiction all the time, and I ask people this. Almost everybody has a family member that has had some kind of an addiction problem. Is that your experience too?
I have had a family member who had a drug misuse problem,
Yeah.
but it didn't involve addiction.
Okay.
But yes.
So you may be one of the very few that hasn't had a close family member have a drug addiction problem or even an alcohol addiction problem.
My sister died from the drug misuse disorder, and I don't think, to me, they're any different.
I may have misheard you. I thought you said you didn't, but you,
No, my sister died from a drug misuse disorder.
I'm sorry. I think I misheard you.
Yeah,
Okay,
I said she had it. I did have her that had it.
Okay.
But it wasn't opioids.
Well, that's fine, but addiction is a disease. Do you know that?
Yes, sir. I do know that.
It's a disease of the brain,
Yes, sir.
isn't it?
Mhm.
People who are addicted are not just bad people doing bad things. They've got a disease.
That's correct.
Okay. So here's my question. And you heard me say, I jumped up and said, absolutely no objection to your qualifications. You're a great heart surgeon. Right?
Okay. Yes, sir.
But if you had a family member that you loved and they got addicted to opioids, I'm just guessing here because I just met you this morning, but I don't think you would treat that family member yourself.
I would not.
We're agreeing on that.
I did not treat my sister either.
Yeah. And it's not because you're not a very good doctor. It's
That's
not
correct.
because you're not experienced. It's just that's not your area.
That's correct.
You would send someone that was opioid addicted to a specialist on that.
That's correct.
And even though you actually use opioids in your practice,
Yes.
just like I use a car in my practice. I drove here this morning, but I'm not an expert on auto mechanics either.
Yes, sir.
And you get my point?
Right.
And you're not an expert on diagnosing opioid addiction or treating it.
No, I see addicts though.
I'm not disagreeing. I mean,
Right. But I do not do the diagnosis and workup of addicts.
yeah, and I want you to understand, I'm not saying you don't know anything about addiction. You went to med school. but you know something about it, it's just that's not your specialty.
That's correct.
Okay, you do recognize that there are physicians in this state and in this country that do in the field of addiction and opioid addiction and treatment of that, and in the field of epidemiology and opioid epidemics, they've devoted their life and their medical career to those specific subjects. Do you understand that?
I do.
There are those, both in Oklahoma and outside of Oklahoma, that study the epidemiology of opioid addiction, and that's their life's work, just like hearts are your life's work.
Is that the question? Yes.
I mean,
I'm aware of individuals that do that, yes.
Yeah, and that's really not your life work.
That's correct. I'm not an opioid addiction specialist.
Right, and I'm not in any way minimizing, I respect you, doctor, and I'm not minimizing your education or your experience, but that's not your area of expertise.
No, but it's, I think, to say that only an opioid addiction specialist can see and recognize addiction, it will lead to a worse problem.
I didn't say that.
I think the more people that are aware of it and what it entails, and I certainly am capable of doing that, and I certainly am capable of seeing and recognizing addicts that aren't even being treated.
No,
To me, the key is to get an addicted patient to an addiction specialist or in treatment. I have a lot of patients that come in with infected heart valves, have never been treated, they're shooting up oxycodone. I see those all the time. So I know a lot about addiction, and I know a lot about what needs to be done to try to save their life.
Let me be clear, I didn't say that,
Okay.
and I wasn't saying that.
Yes, sir.
What I'm saying is, that's not your specialty. There are people that specialize just as much on the epidemiology of the opioid epidemic in this state, in this country. They specialize in that just as much as you specialize in cardiothoracic surgery. That's all I'm asking you.
Well, I'm disagreeing with your wordage because to me, a doctor who takes care of patients every day, I have to be able to recognize hypothyroidism. I have to be able to recognize hypoparathyroidism, diabetic ketoacidosis, renal failure. I also have to know about addiction. Addiction is real, and I know you're very well aware of this. And so in that sense, I am an addiction specialist. And I'll go one further. I think every doctor in America ought to be an addiction specialist. And they also ought to be, if they're a good doctor, they ought to be a specialist in a lot of things. But they don't do that for a living is what you're saying. But I'm saying you're misrepresenting what I think a real doctor is.
I'm misrepresenting something?
Well, if you're implying that a doctor cannot have the ability to engage in and try to save the life of an IV drug abuser who comes in with a blown valve, and I've got to fix him and get him well, then yes, I'm disagreeing with that.
Doctor, I didn't say anything close to that.
Okay.
Are you with me now? I didn't say that. I'm not thinking that. Let me try it one more time so make sure we're understanding each other.
Very good.
You specialize in cardiothoracic surgery. That's what you've spent your life doing.
Yes, but specializing in something doesn't mean you shouldn't have an interest in and a care for other fields.
Doctor, I didn't say that. Just stick with me here, okay?
Okay.
All I'm saying is there are physicians in this country that have devoted their entire career to the epidemiology of the opioid epidemic.
Yes, I understand.
Hard stop.
Yes.
Are you with me on that?
Yes, I
That's all I'm
understand.
saying. I'm not saying you don't know anything about it. I'm saying you have not specialized or devoted your career to the epidemiology of the opioid epidemic in the state or in the country.
I don't do 100% opioid addiction medicine. I do opioid addiction medicine. I know about it, I care about it, and I'm involved in it. And I have to know it when I'm taking care of patients in an active trauma thoracic practice.
That wasn't my question either. Doctor, did you go out and testify or even volunteer to testify when Attorney General Mike Hunter held the Oklahoma Opioid Commission hearings?
I did not.
It was in the newspaper.
I don't read newspapers.
Oh, I see, okay. But you didn't go out there and offer to do it.
I didn't know about it. If you had called me, I would have gone to it, though. I'll tell you that.
I didn't know you. I'll tell you who did know you.
Yeah.
Let's talk about
If
that.
you told John Randolph to call me, I would have gone.
Well, let's talk about who you do know.
Yes, sir.
You didn't know me,
No, sir.
but you did know Larry.
I've known Larry a long time.
You've known Larry a long time. I've got an internet. I looked you up. And you've been sued a few times.
Yes, sir.
And I'm not making any judgment on that. But,
I won them both, but go ahead.
well, you didn't win the toll case that went to the Oklahoma Supreme Court. I read that opinion.
I won it in a 12-0 jury verdict
And lost it
district
in the
court.
Oklahoma Supreme Court. They ruled against you that it was your
Over,
life.
it was overturned, but
Not by the Oklahoma Supreme Court, but I'm trying not to get in that. I said I'm not making a judgment on it. I'm trying to get to how did you get here today?
if
you'll
you
wait-
brought it up, you're making a judgment on it, but I'll give you that.
I just said I'm not making a judgment on it.
Okay,
If you'll let me ask my question, stick with me,
okay.
okay? I'm talking about how you got here today.
Yes, sir.
Every time the doctor gets sued, usually the hospital gets sued. And Larry is in the same law firm today that I started out my career in, the
Yes, sir.
Folliard Law Firm. The Folliard Law Firm was a co-defendant representing Norman Hospital every time you got sued.
Yes.
That's how-
No, not every time I got sued. My other lawsuit that I won was in Baptist Hospital.
Fair enough, but Glenn Huff, Larry's partner, represents Baptist too.
But he wasn't the representative for that time. And I don't know law firms, so I'm at a disadvantage
Well,
there.
you know this one, Larry Ottaway's a personal friend of yours.
Yes, I do.
So he didn't call you because you're an epidemiologist. He didn't call you because you're a recognized expert on opioid addiction. He called you because y'all are friends.
No, he called me because I'm a doctor and he trusts my judgment.
And y'all are friends.
I don't know that. I mean, I get called, I have a lot of people call me for opinions on things, and they're usually lawyers, but they're not all friends of mine. And some of them are plaintiffs' attorneys, by the way. I do plaintiffs' work, and I don't care. I like looking at cases, so the fact that Larry was a friend of mine had nothing to do with the request.
I talked to you in the back of the courtroom today, told you Larry's a dear friend of mine.
Yes,
You
I know.
told me Larry's a dear friend of yours.
Absolutely, I'm not denying that at all.
That's all I was
He's
asking.
cost me a lot of money, so I mean,
That's all I was asking.
yeah, no, he did call me, but he called me because he knows I'm a physician and he trusts my judgment. Just like every phone call I get from a lawyer is because they know I'm a physician and they trust my judgment.
And when you're in a med mal case, doesn't it irritate you when somebody comes in and testifies against you and they're not even a heart specialist?
No,
I see. Well, let's do this, doctor. Have you ever written an article, peer-reviewed and published it, on epidemiology?
no,
Have you ever written an article on the epidemiology of the opioid epidemic?
I have not.
Have you ever written an article or had it published on opioids
I have not.
or on addiction?
No, sir.
Now, isn't it true, and I'm basing this on what I know from my friend John Randolph, I think you all have pretty much the same type of practices.
That's correct. He's far busier than me.
Yeah.
But yes,
And I always kid John, the reason I don't want to have him see me is most of his patients are really, really sick.
they are, and they do really, really well. He's a fantastic surgeon.
I couldn't agree more. He is, no offense to you, I just met you, but I think he's the best.
He'd do mine if I had to have it done.
Well, I want him to stay away from me because I don't want to have my chest
Yes,
cracked
sir.
open.
Yes, sir.
But my point is, most of your patients they're in pretty bad shape. They've got heart problems. You got to
Yes, sir.
crack their chest open.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you prescribe, I'm going to run through these some pretty quick. And you can tell me if I took notes and I heard you wrong.
Okay.
I'm not a court reporter.
Yes, sir.
You prescribe opioids for the treatment of post-operative and acute pain.
That's correct.
So I even heard you say a couple of things. Again, I'm making little notes here. You said, I've never had anybody get addicted on acute treatment.
That's correct.
Did I write that down right?
Yes, sir.
Acute is sudden, severe, like say somebody breaks a leg and they have to go to the hospital to get that leg, fixed. That's acute.
Yes, sir.
So
But also, a lot of my patients are chronic,
I agree.
chronic opioids. But so
I agree with you. I'm just asking,
But
the
that's what
way
acute
the
pain is.
rules work here, we got to ask one question at a time.
Yes, sir.
So right now I'm talking about acute because that's what I heard you say.
Yes, sir.
You've never had anybody get addicted to the use of opioids for acute treatment.
But the problem is, when you said that, in that group of acute patients are patients who are on opioids and that are addicts. So you're trying to lump them all into one group, and you can't do that.
Listen, doctor, I know you're here to testify, but I am taking one question at a time. That wasn't my question. That was Amy's question.
I understand, but to say acute pain and you're talking about opioids, it's really, you have to have the full knowledge of the fact that there's 3 components is all I'm saying. I just want to make sure I was answering the question correctly, to be honest. I didn't want to try to make you mad, but I'm just trying to.
Well, I'm not mad, but here's my deal. I heard you never quarrel with Amy. I heard you very cooperative with her. Cross-examination is supposed to work where you're cooperative with me too.
Yes.
And just answer my question if you would.
I will. I've been married 30 years. We're not quarreling.
I don't think we are.
So go ahead.
But hey, here's the deal. Here's the deal. I just wrote down her question,
Okay.
and I wrote down your answer.
Very good.
You didn't quarrel with her. So I'm trying to make
We're
sure.
not quarreling, Reggie.
You never had a patient get addicted to prescriptions that you gave.
That's
for
correct.
Acute care.
Yes.
Hard stop.
Very good.
Right?
Yes, sir.
I have to ask you both to refrain from talking over each other. Just
That's my
wait till
fault.
one's done. Thank you.
Your Honor, I apologize. That's my fault.
No problem.
I think, I was gonna say it's my fault too, but since he
No.
said it's his fault,
No,
we'll
no,
go
no.
with him.
No, it's mine.
Okay, doctor, listen, I appreciate it. That one was his fault. Okay, stick with me here. I'm gonna try to run through these a little quickly.
Yes, sir.
So, you don't prescribe generally opioids for long-term opioid therapy in your cardiothoracic practice?
I do not.
Thank you. So, for example, generally speaking, I know there's an exception to every rule. I suppose, in theory, you could deliver a baby because you went to med school.
Yes, and I have delivered a baby. My wife has not done an open heart surgery.
And like I said, I could do a criminal case, but
Yeah.
I hope I never do it. But I'm just saying, that's not your deal. You don't prescribe opioids for long-term.
No, the only MS Contin or OxyContin prescriptions I've ever written are on patients who are already on OxyContin, would be a good way to answer that question.
And you understand the state in this case is not attacking the use of opioids for acute care.
I'm not aware of that, but I'll take your word for it.
Let's talk about palliative or end-of-life care. Do you prescribe opioids for the treatment of palliative or end-of-life care?
I do not.
And do you understand what the state's position is on that?
I do not.
Okay, fair enough. Did I hear you correctly? You've never been visited by Johnson & Johnson or Janssen's sales representative.
Not to my memory.
Do you know why they didn't target you?
I do not.
Your Honor, may I approach and put up a couple of the charts? I hope you're not sick of seeing the same chart over and over again, but it's cross-examination. Mike, let's put up the blue Oklahoma-fied version.
Yes, you may.
Have you ever seen this before?
Yes, I have.
You see stuff like this, charts and graphs in your practice all the time.
Correct.
Test results. Hey, doctor, have you ever had a patient where you're convinced that patient does not have something or does have something, and you get the test result back, and you're just totally shocked?
Yes.
The test result shows otherwise.
Right, correct.
All right, well, let's look at this is sort of like a test result. This was prepared by an epidemiologist who testified in this case and took data. So these blue lines are deaths.
I see that.
And down here we have 94 to 2016. The yellow line is the sale of opioids in Oklahoma. Did you know that's carefully tracked?
Doesn't surprise me a bit, but,
We don't have.
and I know it
guess.
from this slide, so yes.
It's like a test result.
Right.
Like an x-ray or a blood test. We don't have to guess.
Both of those things can be measured, yes, you're correct.
All right. Did you know that there's been testimony in this case that before 1996, the sale of opioids, deaths, and overdoses, they're all a flat line going back to the 20s when the Harrison Act was passed. Did you know that?
They're for opioids only, yes, but for all drugs, no.
I'm talking about opioids.
That's correct.
Okay, you with me? You agree
Yes.
with me?
Yes.
Very good. So we didn't have an opioid epidemic, and we didn't have high sales of opioids from the 1920s until 96, right?
Yeah, I don't know the whole data on that, but I just know that the drug overdose death rate is a parabolic curve, starting back in '79. And
Well, you're an expert witness. Did anybody show you the testimony of Dr. Courtright?
no, I saw a little bit of his though, because
Did anybody tell you that thus far in this trial, we got another week going, I guess, but thus far in this trial, his testimony's unrebutted, that there was no opioid epidemic from the 20s all the way to, I'm just going to arbitrarily say 1996.
right. And I have to say though, as over 40 years of practice, the perception is different than that. That wouldn't be the first time that reality didn't match your perception, but we were aware of opioid overdoses going back into the 70s. In fact, opioid is the gateway drug for other addictions, has been proven all the way back into the 70s.
Okay.
B, we don't really have data on the actual particular drug prior to 99, and so all this were combined. So that's why when you see an older surgeon or an older doctor, and he says, well, that's not the way it was back in the 70s, what he's talking about is overdose drugs. Because, Reggie, we did not know the different type of drugs prior to 1996, I think it was. And it was a parabolic curve that went up, just steady as it could be, and it's going up today.
Doctor, I'm going to get to all that.
Okay.
Will you stick? We've got to do one question at a time.
Well, you're talking about back in time, and since I'm from back in time, I wanted to tell you what the reality was back in time.
I don't think you're back to the Harrison Act.
No, I'm not as old as the Harrison Act.
Do you know about the Harrison Act?
Harrison Act, it was the one that actually, well, opioids, you talk about literal opioid use, it was before the Harrison Act.
All right.
And,
But will you stick with me one question at a time?
okay, I'll be glad to.
I want to be clear. I want to be real clear. I didn't say that we didn't have somebody abusing opioids prior to 1996. You didn't think I said that, did you?
No, sir.
Okay. So
But
stick with me.
a point I'm trying to make is, though, I think you do a disservice when you fraction out opioids out of the whole problem. Like if you just say, well, we're just going to deal with opioids and not the other addictions. People die. When the clock strikes, there's going to be another 7 people dead from drug overdoses. And so I think it's more important. You're not going to fight that unless you realize that you're fighting more than just opioids.
Doctor, I heard what you said, but you need to let me ask my question.
Okay.
I'm asking about opioids right now.
Right. Well, you were going back in time, and I just want to make sure we were clear about whenever you start stretching back in time, I'm not going to let you say, well, it wasn't a problem. It was a problem, Reggie. It was a problem going way back.
Doctor, I didn't say it wasn't a problem.
Okay,
One
very good.
overdose is too many. I said there wasn't an epidemic. You heard that, didn't you?
Okay, an epidemic is, it's an endemic. It's not an epidemic. Do you know the difference?
Yeah, we had an epidemiologist.
Explain an
testify.
endemic versus an epidemic.
Doctor,
Yes.
will you let me ask the
Yeah, I'm
question?
sorry, go ahead. But it's not, it's an endemic.
Doctor, will you let me ask the
Yes, I
question?
will.
We did not have an opioid epidemic before 1996, yes or no?
And again, your mischaracterization, epidemic in that use is incorrect. We have an opioid problem, and I'm going to say that again. I'm not disputing this data. I'm just saying it's not an epidemic. It's not something, you don't catch, as you well know, Rich, you can't catch opioid addiction. It's not something that you can get out of the drinking water.
Doctor, 6,100 plus people died from opioid overdoses
Yes.
in the period of time from 2000 to 2017.
I'm just saying they didn't get it from the water. That's an epidemic.
Doctor, I didn't say they got it from the water.
You said it in an epidemic. What's the vector?
Doctor, my question to you is, I'm not asking you about water. 6,100 Oklahomans
Correct.
died from 2000 to 2017. Hard stop. Did you know that? Yes or no?
I've known some of them that were some friends of my kids, so yes, sir, I did.
All right. Did you know 6,100?
No, and I'm aware of that fact. I'm not saying that didn't happen.
Okay. Those kinds of numbers, there was nothing like that in the 20 years before 1996.
That's not true.
In Oklahoma, that
In,
is true.
in the national data on drug overdoses,
I said
were,
Oklahoma. Oklahoma,
well, I don't know Oklahoma doses.
listen to my
but-
question. There was nothing like that in the 20 years before 1996 in Oklahoma, we did not lose anywhere close to 6,100 deaths.
To me, it doesn't matter if you lose 5 or 6,000. It was a problem. When I was an intern, it was a problem during the heroin crisis in the 79, the crack cocaine in the 80s. And I'm just telling you, numbers don't matter to an average practicing doctor. If you have one, that's important.
Doctor.
Yes, there are more now.
Were there 6,100 opioid overdose deaths in Oklahoma in the 20 years before 1996? Yes or no?
No,
There wasn't even close to that, was there?
there weren't, but they was still a problem.
In fact, if you looked from the 20s up into 96, it would be a relatively flat line. Listen to my question before you answer. On just opioid overdose deaths in Oklahoma.
It was not a relatively flat line. It occurred every year.
Doctor, it looked nothing like this line here, did it?
It was not zero.
It was, I didn't say it was zero. But
Okay,
it didn't
I'm
look
just, but I don't
like
want you to
this.
marginalize what happened when I was learning this practice of medicine, and it was a real problem. And
Look, let me ask you it this way. Something different and incredibly bad happened on or about beginning in 96, where opioid deaths skyrocketed both in the United States and in Oklahoma. Isn't that true?
that's true.
This assumes facts, not evidence. It's outside the scope. I've let it go for quite a while now, but I think it's time to adjust.
I overrule.
I'm just trying to get to the fact that we really have something serious going on in Oklahoma, commencing in 96, and that's what this chart shows. This is really serious and really bad.
Yes, it is.
Right?
Yes, it is.
And I've never quarreled with you. Of course, we've had opium wars going all the way
Right.
back 5,000 years. Of course it wasn't zero. My point is, something happened in 96 where it really got bad, right?
Yes.
Okay, we're making progress here. Look, what a coincidence. Look at the blue. Something happened here. I'm sorry, look at the yellow. We have opioid sales going up for the first time in Oklahoma and in this country in the same fashion.
I
Did
see
you know that?
I see that.
Have you seen the Center for Disease Control? Let's put that up, Mike. I'm going to show you a chart. Both sides have used this chart. Have you looked at the Center for Disease Control data on this
I saw
subject?
this earlier this morning. Was the first time I saw it. I've heard it talked about in here, but I've never seen it.
Well, the bottom line is 99 to 2010. That's the time period. Okay, look, green is opioid sales. It goes up dramatically, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
And the overdose deaths in the red goes up dramatically, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
And the blue line, they go up dramatically, don't they?
I see that.
Let's go back to the last chart, because they all go down. They all went up together, but they all start going down. Do you know what happened in the 2012-13 range? Where the prescribing of opioids began to go down, and what a coincidence. Overdose deaths began to go down.
I see that.
Did you know that?
Yes, I was aware of that.
Doctor, the truth is, you work more than 40 hours a week. You've been cracking chests open. You've been really busy. You've never concentrated on the opioid epidemic in Oklahoma until you were asked to testify for Johnson & Johnson in this case.
That's correct. I was aware of the opioid literature and the CDC guidelines, and but no, I did not read extensively about it until then.
And look, I respect you. If Randolph wasn't around and I had to have you crack somebody's chest open and it was me, I would want you to do it.
I wanted it to.
But all right, I just changed my mind. You're not,
Excuse me, Your Honor. Strike that.
you're a little too enthusiastic about cutting on me, so you just lost one patient. All right. But again, I still think my point is a good one. You're
Yes,
not a pain management doctor.
You're correct.
In fact, I heard you tell Amy that you want to get your patients off of opioids, if you can, before they leave your hospital.
Yes, sir.
I heard you say that, right? You don't want to send them home on opioids because that can be very dangerous.
That's correct.
They could get addicted.
Correct.
Now, I want to ask you this, doctor, I want to be real clear. If you have a problem with a patient and you think they are having trouble with either pain management or some kind of addiction problem, are you with me so far?
Yes,
You actually send them to specialists.
that's correct.
Pain management specialists.
That's correct.
Okay, got it. You don't do it.
That's correct.
Okay. And
I recognize the problem and then I get them to the specialist.
yeah, but my point is, even though you could deliver babies, that's not your area of expertise.
correct.
Pain management is not your area of expertise.
That's correct.
Now, I want to ask you about something else. I want to be real clear about this. If someone is on opioids long enough, it's 100% sure they will get addicted to them.
I thought we just established I didn't do chronic opioid therapy.
We did. This is a different question.
Okay.
Look, you're the same guy I talked to a minute ago about epidemiology that started
That's
telling
correct.
me all the opinions you had on it. So
I'm glad to answer the question.
if you don't know the answer, just tell me you don't know.
Well, I can give you an answer. I think that's not true.
So if
In my understanding of opioid addiction, and I'm not an addiction expert, that's why I brought that up. I didn't want to start getting hammered about not being an addiction expert, because I'll be glad to give you an answer to the question. The answer to the question is that I don't think it happens that way. You can't make an addict out of someone who's, there are only a certain percentage of people that can become addicted if you force-fed them opioids. Does that make sense?
I think it's demonstrably false, but where did you get the opinion that you can put someone on opioids long enough, and unless they have a genetic predisposition, they will never get addicted?
Well, part of that's from experience, just patients I've seen on long-term opioids, and part of it's from understanding the physiology of addiction, where you have to have certain genetic markers and none of this is 100%. I'm just saying if you put, the question was 100%, and I think the answer is not 100% in that setting. There's things that are risk factors for addiction. I understand that there are people that don't have those risk factors that can become addicted. But,
You're 100% right about that. You're right about two things. There are people that have genetic predisposition to addiction. There's no
That's
question
correct.
about that. And, but doctor, are you prepared to go on record and saying that you're actually sure that you can give opioids to someone that doesn't have a genetic predisposition and they will never get addicted to them? Is that what I just heard you say?
I don't think you can give 100% people addiction. For one reason, only 20% of them that I know won't take them.
That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a hypothetical where you pick someone and give them opioids long enough. I thought I just heard you say, nope, they won't get addicted.
Okay.
I think that's demonstrably false.
Can I answer it this way, Reggie? And first off, again, I want to admit, I'm not an opioid addiction specialist. So I'm basing my opinion on 40 years of practice. And in my experience, you can put people on opioids long-term and they will not necessarily become addicted to them.
You don't really know that for sure, do you? You're not going to stake.
Excuse me.
May I ask my question?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I thought you were finished.
You're not going to stake your reputation on that statement, are you?
I think
Just
I think I,
objection, asked and answered. He has answered that question now twice.
Sustained.
Well, we'll move on, doctor. Can I go back to the chart for just 1 second?
Yes.
Hey, doctor. Out of all the people that are in this opioid epidemic right here,
yes, sir.
since you don't like the word epidemic, let me rephrase it. Out of all the Oklahomans that are in this big blue pile,
Yes,
I'm just
sir.
going to call it that. 'cause
Yes,
it's-
sir.
Are you with me?
Yes, I am.
How many of those are cardiothoracic patients that led them to get dead from opioids?
I do not know.
Well, it's going to be a very small number, isn't it?
Objection, asked and answered.
Yeah, I have no idea, but I would think so based on my 4 years of experience.
You think I'm right about that?
That it's a very small number?
Yeah.
No, I think it probably is a small number. I mean, I don't know of any of my own that have died from opioid addiction.
Well, I think I heard you say yes, you're agreeing with me, but I also heard you say the word no.
Okay,
You're agreeing with me.
Yeah, I'm agreeing that it's a small number. It's
Right.
kind of a double negative question, but yes.
So you mentioned that opioids used to be called narcotics.
That's correct. It's not, you're supposed to call them opioids now.
I heard you say that. I was curious, who told you you need to stop calling them narcotics and call them?
Well, I think when you look, it's the Bureau of Dangerous Narcotics, and then they changed their name to the DEA, I think, and this was way, way back, a long time ago. And they, and I don't know why they changed it. I mean, we had narcotic agents and narcs and stuff, but I just said that and probably shouldn't have. But I just think they've changed the name from narcotics to opioids, and I think it's probably better definition when you say that.
Well, that's fine. I'll call it whatever you want to call it, but can you and I agree these opioids, they're essentially heroin pills, chemically. They're virtually indistinguishable from heroin.
They're quite distinguishable. Are you talking about the opioids we prescribe, like oxycodone?
Or OxyContin. I'm not saying they're identical, please.
No, they're not identical. Okay, yeah,
They're
okay.
not identical. They're very...
But they're all in the opioid class. Yes, they act the same way in the brain to a different effect, and they have different levels of, from what I understand, euphoria, but yes.
Well, there's been experts that Judge Bachman has heard testify in this case where they've done studies and they've taken experienced heroin users and they get the double-blind study and they don't know if they're taking OxyContin or something like that or taking heroin. And they actually prefer the OxyContin to the heroin. Did you know that?
That's incorrect. He lied.
Oh, I see.
I read the study. He completely flipped it upside down.
What's the name of the study?
I don't know, but I could get it for you. I showed it to my attorneys, and because he lied, and I didn't like it that he lied.
Who lied?
Whoever said that about the heroin addicts, like they can't tell the difference and they like oxycodone better. The actual, it's the inverse. But we could look it up. If you give me time, I can look it up and find it for you. But I'm just telling you that it's a fact.
Okie dokie. Would you agree with me on this, doctor, that opioids are by definition dangerous?
Yes.
They're dangerously addictive?
Yes.
True? They have a high abuse potential because of addiction?
Yes.
And would you agree with me that it would be dangerous for anyone to say that these pills are, I'm talking about opioid pills,
Yes, sir.
are safe and they're not dangerous?
They're safe to take, but they are dangerous.
And doctor, you said you've been given some of the testimony. Did you look at all the marketing documents that Renzi Stone showed the court?
I did not.
Did
I
you?
looked at some of Renzi Stone's testimony, but not.
Oh, I heard you mention just one opinion of Renzi Stone's, and it didn't deal with marketing either. Did you?
I said I didn't.
Yeah. Did
Okay.
you look at his opinions about marketing? Because he's a marketing expert.
Yes, he is.
Did you look at all the documents?
No, I did not.
Did you look at any of the documents?
No, I didn't. I barely had time to look at this. I didn't even completely look at a lot of the stuff they told me to, but I barely had time to do what review the testimonies that they wanted.
I'm just asking if you looked at the
And I said
documents
no.
that we showed Judge Bachman.
No.
Okay, fair enough. Were you aware that Johnson & Johnson and Janssen's marketing materials were telling their sales reps to minimize or understate the risk of addiction?
I would.
That misstates the testimony is not that scope.
I overrule.
Were you?
I was not aware, but that doesn't surprise me, nor does it bother me.
Well, it's interesting. Do you spend money year after year after year on anything that doesn't work?
I'm sure I could think of something if I got a little time, but no, I wouldn't want to.
Well, did you see in the testimony of Renzi Stone, you said you reviewed it, did you see?
I said I reviewed parts of it, but go ahead.
Well, forgive me, doctor. I didn't get that distinction. So you didn't read all of Renzi Stone?
No, I did not.
What, did somebody tab it so that you knew what parts to read?
Yes, the part that I was interested in was when he said that doctors didn't know anything about prescribing opioids.
Now, did you hear my question?
You asked me what part I read, I thought.
No, I asked you if someone tabbed it so you...
Yeah, and that's what I was telling you, that's what they tabbed.
Well, I didn't get an answer. So that's why I asked it twice.
I said yes, and I told you what they tabbed.
All right, so you didn't read the other parts.
No, I did not.
So, so did you see that Johnson & Johnson was spending $30 million a year marketing these opioids, and that didn't include their sales force?
I did not see that, but that would not surprise me either, nor would it bother me.
And now there's been an exhibit introduced in this case, and you're talking about how you read all these things that are outside of cardiothoracic surgery. So let's see if you read this one. There's an exhibit. Can you bring 1480 up?
By the way, that's a misrepresentation. The only things I read are when I see something where I can tell they're not telling the truth.
Okay, doctor, I don't want to argue with you. I'm trying to
Okay,
make
all right, I just want to make sure
point about an exhibit.
I felt like you were misrepresenting the truth.
Hold on, we're both talking over each other.
Yeah,
It's
sorry.
really hard to
That's my fault.
keep it tracked.
I'll stipulate with him.
I like it when you say hard stop. We might need to go back to that.
I've decided with this witness I need to say hard stop.
Yes.
So, okay, Doc, we've been warned by the
Yes, sir.
judge. So
Twice.
let me get my question out
Yes,
because
sir.
the court report can't write it down if you don't let me.
Yes,
finish.
sir.
Can we put up 1480? It's in evidence.
Yes.
This is a medical article. I can't read it from here. Do you mind if I approach?
Go ahead.
Did you read that?
Now I can.
It's JAMA. It's pharmaceutical industry sponsored meals and physician prescribing patterns for Medicare beneficiaries. I won't read all the names of these people. You know any of those people?
I do not.
Have you ever read this article?
Well, you have to tell me what year is it and let me read their, I read a lot of articles on stuff and I can't tell. It looks vaguely familiar, but go ahead. You ask the questions and I'll answer them.
Well, here.
I'm not sure if I've read it.
Okay, fair enough. Let me tell you why I'm asking. This article suggests that doctors are human. They can be influenced by marketing.
It does.
What do you think about that, Doc? Are you human?
I think that actually I've read this article and it doesn't cover an opioid, A. B, all the four drugs in this study were improved versions of old drugs. And C, yes, it did suggest that they were interested in the drugs and that they would use them. And D, I've had that happen to me before where I found a drug that I liked, it was a new drug, and I started to use it. So nothing in this thing, and by the way, the authors in their final paragraph say that does not prove cause and effect. So, but go ahead.
Well, I will go ahead if you'll follow the rules too. If it can be answered yes or no, I'm just politely asking. All I said was question. Are you human too?
Excuse me. Commissioner White was allowed to answer the questions the way she wanted to answer the questions. And all I ask is that our witnesses be afforded the same courtesy. We didn't make the rules in this case. We want to play by the same rules.
Judge, I didn't interrupt him like other people have. I let him finish his answer. But it was a question. It said, are you human too?
I'll allow for the doctor to answer the question the way he did.
And he did.
Yeah, but I was trying to answer the question when I was over speaking you when you said, are you human? Because the answer before that was that doctors can be influenced. And I think I needed to clarify because you were misrepresenting the article.
Doctor, you're actually accusing me of misrepresenting this article because I'm most certainly not.
No, I didn't, but
I thought that's
when you have the
what I
line of questioning before we got to read the article, you wouldn't expose the rest of the article. You immediately went to saying, so this proves that doctors can be influenced, and the article does not say that, Reggie.
Doctor, I didn't ask that. Are you human and can you be influenced by marketing?
I can be influenced by marketing, but I make my own decisions based on it. And if you take the word influence to mean, can I be exposed to an idea? I like being exposed to ideas. I get that happens quite a bit. But I never, ever change anything without verifying it, nor does any doctor that I know. So when you come to me with a marketing question, you just need to understand that that's not how doctors work.
Well, let's just cut to the chase. Maybe we can just ask one or two last questions.
Okay.
Do we have, I'm going to avoid the word opioid epidemic because you told me it's not in the water.
Endemic.
So I'm trying to find a different way to ask it. Do we have a gigantic huge problem with opioid deaths and opioid addictions in Oklahoma post-1996.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And that didn't exist before 1996 in Oklahoma or in the country, did it?
It did not.
And so, Your Honor, can I approach and use my chart?
Yes, you may.
They listed you as an expert. This is something I used earlier. I'm not saying it's exclusive, but I wrote what I thought the 3 issues in this lawsuit were.
Yes, sir.
Is there an opioid epidemic in Oklahoma? So I'll cover this up with my hand because you don't like epidemics, but you've agreed with me. There's a huge, gigantic opioid problem with overdoses
correct.
and deaths. So you agree with me on number 1?
Well, not as it's written, but yes, there's an opioid problem, yes.
Got it. Now, question number 2, what caused the epidemic? I never heard Amy have you testify on number 2. So may I assume you don't have an opinion on what caused Oklahoma's opioid problem?
No, I do have an opinion on that.
I didn't hear her ask you that. What caused all the sudden rise from 1996 to the present with opioid overdose and deaths?
Well, it's, I liken it to a perfect storm. There was a lot of things that happened in the 90s, and the problem, I would say, probably started in the 80s, but it was one, and I think I've heard testimony from your physicians, read testimony, that the doctors in 1996 were well-meaning, opioid conservative doctors. They were compassionate. They wanted to do the right thing. I think this court has established that all those doctors in 1996, and I was one of them, were that way. So what it wasn't marketing that came in and did that. For example, we've already established if you have a group of opioid conservative, intelligent, well-meaning, caring physicians, they're going to be very resistant to any marketing. These were good physicians writing prescriptions, and there were people that were dying of opioid-related deaths. It took the government and all of us a long time to figure that out. But yes, it was a problem. And so if you ask me what caused the epidemic, I'm going to say it's a perfect storm of a desire to help a large group of people that were really suffering from pain. When I was a physician in the 80s and 90s, it was a huge problem. And the whole pain specialty started as a response to that. We desperately wanted to help them. There was no happier physician in Oklahoma, I think, than me when the pain specialist, when these people were willing to start and do their research on how to help these poor people. And I think that, and I'm not an expert on this, this is just my opinion, and I'm not said anything like this, and I'm not supposed to testify about anything like this, but this is just what I believe.
So this is a non-expert opinion.
It's an opinion, it's an expert, a guy who's worked 40 years in Oklahoma.
No, I'm sorry, I took your words. I thought I just heard you say this is not an expert opinion. Was I wrong?
I said I'm not an expert in opioid addiction medicine,
Okay.
but it is multifactorial. What it wasn't do was to marketing. I think that's what this original line of questioning was about, but go ahead.
I still haven't heard you. By the way, I just heard you say it was an epidemic. Did you realize you said that?
That's written there.
No, we have a court reporter here, and your testimony's being filmed. In your answer, did you realize that you used the word epidemic?
Well, if it's that way, it's a slip. I don't like to use that word, but
Whoops.
if you say it, I use it, that's fine.
Okay.
Doesn't mean I like the word.
Yeah, I think he was referring to your number question.
That's fine. I'm not going to nitpick you, but I never heard you say what caused it. You said it's multifactorial. I heard you say it wasn't the marketing.
Do you want me to give the explanation again?
Well, that's what I asked 5 minutes ago.
So you want me to tell you what I think?
What did cause it?
I'm sorry, I think this has been asked and answered. It's also outside the scope.
I sustain Ms. Fisher's objection. My notes say he used the word perfect storm. I believe he's answered the question.
What were the items in the perfect storm? I said
It wasn't one thing, Reggie. It wasn't one thing.
I sustain the objection.
Okay. Well, and you haven't offered any testimony on how to fix it.
Yes, that's also outside the scope, Your Honor, objection. And ask him.
I will overrule the objection.
You haven't offered any testimony on how to fix it.
I have not yet.
Well, can we agree that whatever happened, you don't like calling it an epidemic, and that's fine. Can we agree that it's bad and it needs to be abated?
We can agree on that, but I want to say
Okay.
that, listen, I think I should be allowed to answer the question. I think it should be fixed. I think to say just opioid epidemics limits the problem, and people will die until we recognize the real problem, which is drug overdose. That occurred when you saw the deaths going down, and I know you know this, Reggie, they're still going up for drug overdose. In fact, this year was the first year since 1991 that overdose deaths have gone down. And I think that we need to have a concerted approach using all the physicians and the help that you're providing, by the way, in a number of different areas, and in order to do that.
Well, I appreciate that, Doctor, but in all fairness, that wasn't my question. I simply asked if it needed to be fixed. Yes?
Yes.
And so my last question is this. I know this didn't happen because Larry didn't call you. He wasn't even representing J&J, I don't think. But if Johnson & Johnson, somebody really high up who has the authority to spend $30 million a year marketing opioids, plus all their sales reps, if they come to you and said, we have this ambitious plan to market opioids, I guess you just tell them, save your money, folks, because it simply doesn't work on us doctors.
No, what I would say is, first off, the pharmaceutical companies, in my mind, bear zero responsibility for what the problem we're having currently.
Yeah,
And second off, I would not regard that as marketing. I think you cheapen it when you call it marketing. I wouldn't. If someone came and tried to save someone's life, I wouldn't say, "Are you marketing, Reggie?"
Doctor, their documents call it marketing.
You're talking about someone giving them $30 million for doing something really good, and I'm going to say that I'm going to equate that to marketing. You think that's true? No, that's not true.
Doctor, their documents call it marketing over and over again. So can you...
$30 million offer to fix a problem is not marketing, Reggie. That's what I want to hear you say.
No, I didn't say they were doing it in 1996 or 1999 to fix a problem. Would you have just told them, save your money because doctors can't be influenced?
I'm saying that any doctor that listens to a pharmaceutical representative takes the information, digests it, tests it, and sees whether it's safe to use. That happens right now as we're speaking in all the hospitals in Oklahoma City. It will continue to happen that way. That is the effect, and I don't even like the term marketing because you're not marketing to a doctor. You don't market to the Pope. You don't market to someone that really truly believes in what they're doing. You can talk to them and try to suggest things, but you don't. But it's up to that person to make the decision, the doctor.
Would you tell them just to save their money or not?
To help people. Are you getting back to helping $30 million to help people?
No, doctor. It's pretty clear to me you're trying to help Johnson & Johnson. So with that, I don't have any other questions.
I have nothing further. Thank you, Dr. Cole. Thank you.
Dr. Toll, you may be excused. Thank you.
Exhibit?
All right, I believe the only exhibit this morning was the two-page exhibit. We'll call that Courts Exhibit 173.
We got it, Lauren?
Yes. Okay. That will conclude our proceedings for today. As I said before, will come back Monday at 9 a.m. I'm told by the defendants, they believe that they'll be able to wrap up and we may be able to finish this trial before the beginning of the week of July 22nd. So we'll see how that plays out. That would be certainly earlier than we had anticipated. Mr. Beckworth?
If that happens, will you be closing Monday? If they rest on Friday?
Yes.
Roll that into it?
Yes. Any other announcements or questions by council before we let you go?
Happy 4th of July.
Yeah, so we hope you all have a great break for Independence Day. You know, I was just thinking it's great that we can have these very adversarial court proceedings, but we're also all citizens and friends when it's over. And I appreciate the civility that's being displayed. So thank you all. Have a great Independence Day holiday.
Thank you.